Chapter 906. In the face of Chu Liyue's questioning, Jiang Yuqing chose to remain silent. His mouth was tightly shut, and he refused to say anything. He even shifted his gaze and turned around, as if he didn't intend to continue chatting with Chu Liyue. Snap! Chu Liyue snapped her fingers. A cluster of crimson flames rose from between his fingers, and the painting was instantly set ablaze. Jiang Yuqing heard the commotion and suddenly turned around. When he saw this scene, the veins on his forehead throbbed fiercely. Since you refused to speak, then there's no need to continue chatting. As for this painting, you should have burned it on the day you decided to kill this consort. Chu Liyue's tone was cold and resolute. Seeing this painting would only make her feel more disgusted. Who was he pretending to be infatuated with her all these years? If he still had the slightest bit of sincerity, he wouldn't have done those things back then. Absurd, laughable. The painting was quickly devoured by the flames, and finally turned to ashes. When the last bit of starlight was extinguished, Jiang Yuqing's face flickered for a moment. He seemed to want to snatch the painting, but in the end, he didn't do anything. Chu Liyue gave him a meaningful look, then turned and left. After her figure disappeared, the room once again regained its deathly silence. Not long after, there was a burst of mournful and tragic cries coming from the main hall next to them. A trace of disgust appeared on Jiang Yuqing's face. It was Sheng Guanwan's cry, as if it was time for her to be tortured again. Almost every day, there would be such a cry. Without looking, it wasn't hard to imagine what kind of terrible pain the owner of this voice was going through. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a burning pain in his heart. His face paled, and he slowly bent over. After dealing with these matters, Chu Liyue planned to return to Zhaoyu Hall first. Although her status was different from before, she still lived in her previous palace. Just as she reached the entrance of Zhaoyu Hall, she saw a familiar figure. Chang Wanzhou. He seemed to be waiting for her. When he heard her footsteps, he raised his head and looked over. Chu Liyue was a little surprised and walked over. Xiaozhou, why are you back so soon? Previously, she had asked Chang Wanzhou to do her a favor, to return to country Yaochun and bring Chu Ning over. When she left Yaochun, Chu Ning only knew that she came to the Tianling dynasty with Mu Qinghe, but she didn't know that she came back for revenge. Naturally, she didn't know her true identity either. Now that the dust had settled, she planned to invite Chu Ning over for a reunion and tell him the truth. The previous Chu Liyue was already dead, and the one living in this body had long been replaced by her. Even though it was too cruel for a father to say this, it was unavoidable. Now that she had regained her identity in Tianling, she could no longer pretend to be Chu Liyue. She had already thought it through. As long as Chu Ning was willing, she would be his daughter for the rest of her life. Whether he wanted to stay in Xiling or return to Yaochun in the end, she would respect his choice and do her best to accompany and take care of him. After her rebirth, although she had only been with Chu Ning for less than a year, she had long regarded Chu Ning as her real father. Chu Liyue only realized that Chang Wanzhou's expression was a little strange when she walked up to him. She suddenly felt a sense of unease. Then she heard Chang Wanzhou say, "Lord Chu Ning is missing." There was dead silence in the study of Zhaoyu Hall. Chu Liyue sat at the head of the table, while Chang Wanzhou stood 5 steps in front of her. The air was so cold that it seemed to be freezing inch by inch. In that case, he was already missing when you arrived at the imperial capital of Yaochun? Chang Wanzhou nodded. Yes, I asked around, and they all said that Lord Chu Ning went to Tianling alone a month ago. They said that he received your letter. I heard that many people were envious. However, I went to Heaven's Canopy to check, and there was no trace of Lord Chu Ning. Although Chang Wanzhou had never seen Chu Ning before, Chu Liyue had drawn a portrait for him long ago. As long as he saw him, he would definitely recognize him at a glance. Moreover, he was powerful and agile. He also had many trump cards. Even if he acted alone, Chu Liyue could rest assured. She thought that everything was arranged properly, but she never expected that Chu Ning was no longer in Yaochun. I never wrote a letter to father asking him to come to Xiling. Chu Liyue's face was cold as if covered with a thin layer of frost. If this rumor was true, then who was the one who sent the letter to him? If this rumor was false, it would be even more troublesome. It meant that they didn't even know where Chu Ning went. The world was so big. Finding a person was like finding a needle in a haystack. Chu Liyue frowned, and her mind raced. Call Chi Han over. The moment Chi Han entered the room, he felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. Your Highness. He cupped his fists and bowed respectfully. Chu Liyue didn't beat around the bush and asked directly. Chi Han, you've been in charge of the letters between father and I, right? Chi Han was stunned and immediately said, yes. Other than the first letter I wrote to father to tell him that I'm safe, I didn't write a second one. Has there been a letter from father? Chu Liyue paused and tapped her fingers on the table. According to the news that Xiao Zhou found out, father had already set off for West Hill a month ago, because he received my letter. However, there was no trace of him until now. When Chi Han heard this, he also realized the seriousness of the matter. He pondered carefully for a while. There's no. Just as he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression froze. Previously, Miss Mu's father and mother had written a letter, and this subordinate had passed it to young Master Jian. Is there anything written in that letter? Chu Liyue thought for a moment, then got up and walked outside. Chu Liyue was extremely fast and headed straight for Dragon Teeth Mountain. When she reached the foot of the mountain, the disciple on guard saw someone coming and was about to stop her when she took off her hood, revealing a gorgeous face. Where's Jian Fengqi? Chu Liyue had been here before. In addition to the Wanzhong competition and the sect meeting, many people knew her. Recently, because of her shocking identity, everyone in Xiling was talking about her. They didn't expect her to suddenly appear here at this time. Greetings, Your Highness. The two hurriedly bowed, but halfway through, they remembered that she was now an emperor and quickly changed their greetings. Young master is on the mountain today. I'll take you there. No need. I'll go personally. Chu Liyue said, and hurried up the mountain. When she was halfway up the mountain, she happened to meet Mu Hongyu. When she saw Chu Liyue, Mu Hongyu was pleasantly surprised. Liyue, why are you here? She rushed over, and was about to pounce on Chu Liyue when she hurriedly stopped. She had almost forgotten that Liyue was no longer Liyue. Chu Liyue grabbed her hand. In the letter that your father and mother sent you, did they mention my father? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 907. Mu Hongyu was stunned. I think it was mentioned. Wait a minute. As she spoke, she rummaged through her interspatial ring and took out a letter after a short while. She had always been very careful with the letters from Yao Chen. This letter was handed to me by young master a few days ago. As Mu Hongyu spoke, she handed the letter over. It only mentioned one sentence. Chu Liyue opened the letter and skimmed through it. As expected, she saw a sentence at the end. It said that Chu Ning had received her letter and was planning to go to the West Hill to reunite with her. During that period of time, Mu Hongyu's parents had been staying in the capital. When they heard the news, they were very envious. They wanted to come and see Mu Hongyu, but after considering many factors, they couldn't go together. Chu Liyue looked at the date. It was indeed a month ago. She frowned. The distance between the capital of Yaochun and the Tianling West Hill was more than tens of thousands of miles. Most importantly, there was also the heavens canopy. What kind of news did father receive to come to the West Hill so decisively? One had to know that with his strength, if no one led him, it would be impossible for him to find those teleportation arrays, let alone reach them safely. It was impossible for him not to understand these principles. But he still did it. Was it because he was confident, or because someone had helped him, or was he coerced? So much time had passed. I wonder how father is doing. Seeing Chu Liyue's grave expression, Mu Hongyu also sensed that something was wrong. What's wrong? Is there a problem with uncle? Chu Liyue briefly explained the matter to her. Mu Hongyu said in surprise. You didn't ask him to come? I thought you really wrote a letter to invite him. When she received the letter, it was right after Chu Liyue announced his identity. At that time, she was still shocked that Chu Liyue was actually Sheng Guanyu. So when she saw the letter, she naturally thought that Chu Liyue had already made preparations and planned to bring Chu Ning over after everything was settled. But now, It seemed that this was not the case at all. Chu Liyue's hand gripped the letter tightly. His brows furrowed as his mind raced. It was obvious that someone had deliberately used her name to make a move on her father. But who could it be? To be able to do this, the person must be someone from heaven's canopy. More importantly, the person must know her very well. Otherwise, the other party would never have thought of making a move on his father's side. Why was the other party doing this? Threatening her? But until now, she didn't seem to have received any news. If she hadn't sent Chang Wanzhou to Yaochen this time, who knew when she would have found out about her father's disappearance? Why are you guys standing here? Just as the two of them fell silent, Jian Fengqi suddenly arrived. He waved the fan in his hand and walked over with a charming smile. However, his gaze fell on Chu Liyue and sized her up carefully, as if he had never seen her before. When he got closer, he put away his fan, cupped his fists and bowed slightly. "Greetings, Your Majesty." He really didn't expect that Shang Guanyu wasn't dead back then, and had even returned with another identity. No wonder he always felt that Chu Liyue was very familiar. So it was her. Now that he saw her again, his mood was indeed very strange. Seeing that the two of them seemed a little serious, Chu Liyue was still holding the letter he had given to Mu Hongyu. It seemed like something had happened. What's going on? Jian Fengqi's gaze quickly scanned the duo's faces as he asked. Chu Liyue returned the letter to Mu Hongyu and briefly explained what had happened. Jian Fengqi gradually frowned and tapped his hand with the bone fan. "After you returned to West Hill, you have indeed offended many people, but there shouldn't be many who would think of harming Lord Chu Ning, right?" Although Chu Liyue had now ascended the throne, Jian Fengqi had always been bold and unrestrained. He had always been used to being free and unrestrained in front of her, so his words were still as unrestrained as before. Chu Liyue didn't mind and nodded slightly. "I thought that there would be some clues in this letter, but the content of the letter was similar to the information that Chang Wanzhou had found out. There weren't any more clues. Don't you have any way to find Lord Chu Ning?" Jian Fengqi asked curiously. Based on her usual prudence and intelligence, she should have been prepared for this. Moreover, when she left the imperial capital and went to West Hill, which was thousands of miles away, she should have been more careful in this regard. Chu Liyue shook her head. It's too far away. She had indeed left something with Chu Ning, so that it would be convenient for them to confirm each other's location and safety. However, the two of them were so far away now. How could they detect each other? Then the current solution is to try our best to find him. Jian Fengqi pondered for a moment. But I'm afraid this matter shouldn't be made public. To the current Chu Liyue, this matter could be said to be both simple and difficult at the same time. Now that she had regained her identity and the entire Tianling was under her control, it wasn't difficult for her to send someone to find the whereabouts of a person. However, the key was that Chu Ning's identity was somewhat special. He was the biological father of Chu Liyue's body. Chu Liyue's identity was different from before. Moreover, Shang Guanyu had regained consciousness and was living well in the palace. Thus, Chu Ning's existence became a little awkward. I've already sent someone to look for him in private, but the world is so big, and without any clues, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Seeing her worried expression, Mu Hongyu couldn't help but pat her hand gently. "Liyu, don't worry. Uncle is a good person, and nothing will happen to him." Chu Liyue sighed softly. "I hope so." Jian Fengqi looked at the two of them overlapping hands at the side, and his eyes flickered slightly. Shang Guanyu was indeed different from before. In the past, when she was the empress, although she was very amiable, she always carried a faint aura of alienation and nobility. Actually, it wasn't intentional. It was because she was too outstanding from the moment she was born, which caused her to have an indescribable sense of loneliness. Not to mention others, almost none of the children in the Tianling royal family were very close to her. Everyone subconsciously looked up to her, so naturally they distanced themselves from her. Perhaps it was because of this that she was so good to Shang Guanwan, who was closer to her back then. Even Mu Qinghe later, after returning from the tribulation, her personality had obviously changed a little. She had the most trusted friends and many things that she didn't have before. She seemed to have become a lot more real. Thinking of this, Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment before finally asking, "Have you seen Mu Qinghe?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 908. Chu Liyue's eyelashes fluttered slightly as she looked up at him. "Not yet. What's the matter?" "It's nothing. I was just asking casually." Jian Fengqi clenched his fist and coughed against his lips. "I remember that you seem to have a good relationship with Mu Qinghe." Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows and asked. Jian Fengqi pouted in his heart. She kept saying, "I," when she was talking to Mu Hongyu, and she sounded so affectionate. She addressed him as I, the moment she spoke to him. Was she afraid that he wouldn't remember her current identity? After all, he had helped her a lot in the past. Why was she treating him differently now? However, he didn't dare to say this out loud. "Your Majesty remembered wrongly." Jian Fengqi averted his gaze and looked away. "Isn't Your Majesty the clearest about our relationship back then?" Chu Liyue's lips curved up. "Yes, I still remember that when Hongyu's mother fell ill, Mu Qinghe directly asked you to go to Yaochen to help. If the two of them didn't have a strong relationship, how could someone like Jian Fengqi travel so far to help treat someone's illness?" Later on, Mu Qinghe directly entrusted her to Jian Fengqi and asked him to bring her back to Xiling. It was obvious that the two of them had a lot of private dealings and trusted each other very much. Wasn't it too late to say that their relationship wasn't good now? Jian Fengqi's face stiffened for a moment. How could he forget? Chu Liyue also knew about those things back then. He remembered them clearly. Seeing that he couldn't deny it, Jian Fengqi could only speak vaguely. "If Your Majesty really wants to put it this way, there's nothing wrong with that. Mu Qinghe is the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry after all. His status isn't low and he holds great power. Isn't it normal for me to have a lot of dealings with him?" Chu Liyue's smile deepened. It would have been fine if Jian Fengqi hadn't said that. But he did, which proved that he had a guilty conscience. She said slowly, "That's right. Oh, so that's how it is. But when I was the Empress concubine, didn't I have a higher status than him? Didn't you still not give me any face? Why did she suddenly change her temperament?" Jian Fengqi choked. It was rare for him to be at a loss for words. "If that's the case, then follow me to Mu Clan." Chu Liyue lifted his chin slightly. "It just so happens that I have a lot of questions to ask you all." Jian Fengqi was filled with regret when he arrived at Mu Mansion and looked at the familiar door. Why couldn't he restrain himself from talking too much? If he hadn't taken the initiative to bring this up, he definitely wouldn't have been forcefully brought here. The Black Cavalry was still in charge of guarding Mu Mansion, but the previous batch of people who were Mu Qinghe's confidants had all been replaced. The guards standing in front of the door were shocked when they saw the two of them. They were about to salute when Chu Liyue waved his hand. "Where's Mu Qinghe?" One of the guards hurriedly said. "Vice President Mu. He's been in the mansion all this time. Lord Shijing is also here." Previously, Chu Liyue sent Shijing to escort Mu Qinghe back, and Shijing had been staying here since then. Mu Qinghe's cultivation hadn't been destroyed, and only people at Shijing's level could suppress him. Chu Liyue nodded slightly and walked straight in. Jian Fengqi was struggling in his heart and didn't want to continue forward. Then, he saw Chu Liyue turn around and glance at him. Jian Fengqi's heart trembled, and he finally followed him obediently. As soon as they entered the inner courtyard, Shijing heard the noise and came out directly. "Your Highness." The 13 new guards were directly under Chu Liyue, so although she was now in power, they were still used to calling her Your Highness. Chu Liyue was very direct. "I brought Hong Yao and young Master Jian to see Mu Qinghe." "Jian Fengqi." Shijing glanced at Jian Fengqi in surprise. It was not strange for Her Highness and Hong Yao to come, but what did it have to do with Jian Fengqi? But he didn't ask much. Mu Qinghe is now in the training field in the backyard. Although Mu Qinghe was imprisoned in Mu Mansion and was not allowed to go out, she was relatively free here. Anyway, barriers and Xian formations had already been set up outside, so Mu Qinghe couldn't escape. When they came to the training field, Chu Luiyue saw Mu Qinghe practicing swordsmanship on the empty training field at a glance. Hearing the sound, he stopped and looked back. When he saw Chu Luiyue, a trace of fluctuation flashed in his eyes, but he quickly calmed down and returned to his usual indifferent calmness. Hong Yao flapped its wings and flew out. It hesitated in front of Chu Luiyue, looking at Mu Qinghe, and then at Chu Luiyue. It looked very pitiful. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. Okay, she's your master after all. Go if you want to. When Hong Yao heard this, it happily rubbed itself against her face, and then flew towards Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe only saw a blue shadow coming straight to her, and a moment of hesitation appeared on her face. Now that Hong Yao could follow her, it couldn't be better. If she had an intimate relationship with him, it didn't seem too good. However, Hong Yao had been very worried about her these days. At this time, it finally saw her, so it rushed straight to her. How could it care about anything else? It directly bumped into Mu Qinghe's arms. Mu Qinghe had no choice but to catch it and pat its head gently. Hong Yao's eyes were red, and it almost cried again, but fortunately, it stopped in time. Mu Qinghe glanced at it with a complicated look. Chu Luiyue asked him to stay in the name of Hong Yao. Of course, it was just a superficial excuse. She would never let go of anyone who betrayed her easily. Logically speaking, he should have been killed on the same day. However, no. She spared his life, and didn't even give him any punishment. She just put him under house arrest in Mu Mansion. And here, except for the fact that he couldn't move freely, and the people around him no longer obeyed his orders, everything else seemed to be the same as before. He vaguely guessed Chu Luiyue's plan, but she didn't come after waiting for several days. Until today. Moreover, she brought Jian Fengqi with her. Mu Qinghe's gaze stopped on Jian Fengqi for a moment. Jian Fengqi instantly felt that there was a dagger at his back, and he couldn't wait to run away. He had always been thick-skinned and rarely felt like this. He only felt that every minute and every second of staying here was very unbearable. He really didn't bring Chu Luiyue here on purpose. I left West Hill for 2 years. Chu Luiyue said lightly. In West Hill City, things have changed. I came here today to ask, when did the two of you become so close to each other? Back then, because Jian Fengqi was too presumptuous and flamboyant, Mu Qinghe had a lot of conflicts with him. Now, in the blink of an eye, the two of them seemed to have turned from enemies to friends. She really didn't believe that there was nothing going on here. Asked Chu Luiyue with a smile as she sat down on a chair at the side. Qinghe, you go first. Digression. The 5th update is a little late, but it was released before 1 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 909. Mu Qinghe was taken aback by the sudden shout, and he looked at the woman not far away. She was sitting there leisurely. Her clothes were very simple, but she still had a noble aura. She still had a smile on her youthful face, and her eyes were as bright as stars. She looked just like she did many years ago. However, she called him by his name in such a relaxed tone, as if the grudges of the past few years didn't exist at all. Mu Qinghe slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves and lowered his eyes. It's just a normal meeting. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry. Mu Qinghe only gave a short answer. Then, he closed his mouth, and didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Jian Fengqi glanced at him, as if he wanted to say something. He knitted his brows slightly, and hesitation flashed across his eyes. Even now, he still doesn't want to say anything. In fact, what Chu Luiyue asked was also what he wanted to ask. When the Imperial Ancestral Hall burned for a day and a night, even he was alarmed and rushed to the palace. In the end, Mu Qinghe was even later than him. Even he could see that there was something wrong with the princess's death. However, Mu Qinghe didn't express any objections from the beginning to the end. If it weren't for some things that happened later, Jian Fengqi would almost believe that he had completely betrayed Shen Guanyu. If he was on Jiang Yuqing's side in the past because he cared about the big picture, now that Jiang Yuqing and Shen Guanwan had been destroyed, what else could he say? Jian Fengqi really didn't understand. He wanted to help explain, but in fact he didn't know much. Mu Qinghe was the only one who knew the reason for many of the things he did. If others said anything, It would only complicate the situation. What do you think? Chu Liyue didn't seem surprised by Mu Qinghe's answer. He shrugged and looked at Jian Fengqi. Jian Fengqi's eyebrows twitched. It was just a small quarrel in the past. Come to think of it, there wasn't much conflict. Chu Liyue smiled faintly, but his eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Jian Fengqi's words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. He could not help but look at Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, he raised his head again and calmly said, His Majesty sent out 3 requests for help that day, right? Chu Liyue slowly sat up straight and stared at him. Mu Qinghe put one hand behind her back and slowly clenched it, but her expression was calm. Those 3 messages were intercepted by me. It was me who cut off His Majesty's last chance of survival that day. It was already the middle of June, and the weather was a little hot. People came and went on the streets, and it was very lively. Rong Xiu walked alone on the street. Because he wore a hood and restrained his aura, he didn't attract much attention. Most of the people around were still talking about her. Rong Xiu walked forward and listened to the discussions of the people around him. Every time he heard those people's exclamations of surprise and admiration, his thin scarlet lips would curl slightly. She could always do what she wanted to do. It wasn't that he didn't want to come and help, but in the end, he still felt that it was better for her to give it her all. It was best for her to take back what she had lost. It was best for her to take revenge on her own. Only then could she completely wash away all the pain she had suffered. As for him, all he had to do was pass the knife to her whenever she needed it. Of course, the knife had to be fast enough. Just as he was thinking of this, he suddenly felt his surroundings darken. He raised his head to take a look and found that the sky that was previously clear and boundless was now suddenly filled with dark clouds and darkening. Soon, raindrops fell from his forehead. It was cold. He was walking in the direction of the 100 Herbs building, but he didn't expect that the weather would change halfway. The rain soon became heavier. The peddlers packed up and left one after another. White mist gradually appeared on the bluestone. There was only a curtain of rain between heaven and earth. Rong Xiu frowned slightly, and there was a deep look in his eyes. Then he turned around and walked in another direction. The tall figure of the man quickly disappeared in the rain. After Chu Liyue walked out of the Mu mansion alone, she walked aimlessly on the street. In her mind, she kept recalling what Mu Qinghe said just now. He admitted it. He said that he did it. What else did he say? Oh right, he said that he was originally Jiang Yuqing's man. So, his betrayal was actually not a betrayal. It turned out that the truth was like this. Countless scenes flashed before her eyes. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. The wind gradually rose, and the surrounding sky quickly darkened. She glanced up at him. It was stuffy, gloomy, and cold. She had already forgotten what kind of expression she had after hearing those words, and what kind of answer she gave. She didn't even know how she walked out of the Mu mansion. Suddenly, she felt a furry touch. It was Dumpling squatting on her shoulder, gently rubbing her face. Chu Liyue shook her head. Dumpling, don't worry. I'm fine. She probably left hope for herself, thinking. But in this world, there weren't so many thinking. Chu Liyue looked at the sky, and there was rain dripping. In the blink of an eye, it sped up, connecting the sky and the earth into lines. Chu Liyue moved, and was about to go back, but she suddenly felt a cold aura rushing toward her from the distance in the rain. She suddenly looked up. Alarm bells rang in her heart. A bluish-purple ball of light broke through the air. It was heading straight for her face. She staggered her feet, and was about to make a move when she suddenly felt someone approaching her from behind quickly and grabbing her waist. At the same time, a silver blade of light flew out. It collided with the ball of light. It was as if a transparent barrier had appeared around him, and all the fluctuations were blocked outside. An extremely familiar cold fragrance hit her, and Chu Liyue's heart suddenly beat faster. She turned around and saw that the person who came had a noble appearance and an astonishing aura. It was Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu, why are you here? Chu Liyue widened her eyes slightly. Rong Xiu hugged her tighter, and his other hand held a black umbrella. His voice was low and lazy. It's raining. I'm here to hold the umbrella for you. Mobile users, Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9-10. Her heart, which had been empty, seemed to be filled with something in an instant. Chu Luiyue subconsciously hugged his lean waist tightly and pressed her face against his chest. Listening to his strong heartbeat, it seemed to make the almost frozen blood in her body flow again. The heavy rain fell, and the cold wind blew everywhere. Countless ripples on the ground intertwined. Under the dark sky, only the two of them, who were tightly leaning against each other, could be seen. With a burst of eardrums, Chu Luiyue felt that her drifting thoughts were finally pulled back. Her numb limbs gradually regained their warmth, and the countless illusions in front of her disappeared little by little. Only Rongxiu was left, hugging and leaning on each other. It was so real. The black umbrella above her head stood up, as if it was blocking out all the wind and rain. His broad and warm embrace made her yearn for it. Chu Luiyue was in a daze. After a while, she said in a low voice, "Rongxiu, I miss you so much." Rongxiu frowned slightly. There was something wrong with her voice. She had always been smart, independent and strong. No matter what kind of situation she encountered, she never seemed to panic. Even after experiencing such a betrayal, she still relied on her own strength to return all the pain she had suffered and take back everything that belonged to her. She seemed to be invincible. But in this world, how could any flesh and blood not know pain and suffering? It was just that someone was better at hiding it. He leaned closer, and his jade-like chin gently rested on her head. "I'm here, don't be afraid." It was a simple sentence, but it was his most cherished promise. Chu Luiyue's eyes suddenly became hot. Even if she was homeless and miserable, even if she was full of twists and turns, there would always be one person in this world who would appear and accompany her when she needed him most. He gave her courage and love. That was enough. She closed her eyes, dispersing the last bit of disappointment and regret in her heart. Anyway, it was not like she had not experienced a deeper blow. Now this was nothing. At the very least, the current situation was still under her control. Bang! The sound of something exploding came from behind. Chu Luiyue looked up from Rongxiu's arms and glanced back. She saw that the purplish-blue ball of light that was flying towards her had completely dissipated after colliding with Rongxiu's power. At this moment, there was only something left that fell into the water. Pitter-patter, splashing a few drops of rainwater. Chu Luiyue looked over and vaguely saw that it was a thumb-sized object. It was glowing faintly in the water, but he couldn't see it clearly. "What's that?" Chu Luiyue asked curiously. Just now, she had clearly sensed that this thing was coming for her. The aura he felt at that moment was very unfamiliar. She thought for a moment, but she couldn't figure out who would do such a thing. "It's just a small toy," Rongxiu said lightly. Chu Luiyue didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Rongxiu seemed to have recognized the origin of that thing, and there was a hint of coldness in his tone. Chu Luiyue gave Dumpling a look. Dumpling flew out and picked up the thing. Rongxiu glanced at Dumpling, his eyes cold. Dumpling shuddered. Its strong desire to live made its wings tremble slightly, and it almost threw the thing out. Withstanding the huge pressure, it finally handed the thing to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand and was about to receive it when Rongxiu, who was beside her, grabbed her hand. At the same time, a force flew out and hit the item. Bang! With a crisp sound, the thing cracked open. Then a piece of paper flew out and unfolded automatically. It seemed to be a piece of white rice paper that was casually cut, but it floated in mid-air and didn't get stained by the raindrops at all. It was as if there was an invisible barrier around it. There were only 2 lines of words on that piece of paper. The first line was, "Shangguan Yu, congratulations." The second line was, "Your father is doing very well at I's place, don't miss him. We will meet again in a month's time." Just as Chu Luiyue finished reading, that piece of paper quickly combusted and turned into ashes, disappearing without a trace. Other than the faint smell of burning that filled the air, it was as if nothing had happened. But Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes wide, and her heart was filled with shock, because she had seen the handwriting on that piece of paper before. Back then, she had received a letter from Heaven's Canopy, and that letter had half a Xian formation as a seal. She had drawn the remaining half of the Xian formation before opening the letter. And that letter had written, Shangguan Yu, long time no see. At that time, she hadn't told anyone about her identity. So after receiving that letter, she had thought about it for a long time, but she couldn't figure out who wrote the letter. After coming to Xiling, she had been busy with various things, and had forgotten about this matter for a while. Until today, when she saw that piece of paper again. It must have been written by the same person, and the other party had obviously known about her identity a long time ago. It was even possible that the other party knew everything about her like the back of their hand. Needless to say, this congratulations was referring to her ascension to the throne. And her father was also deliberately taken away by the other party. Chu Liyue frowned. This person, who exactly was it? At first, she thought that it was someone from the Tianling dynasty, but now it seemed that it wasn't the case. To be able to call himself I, and have such means, it was very likely that he came from outside the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed across the corner of his eyes. She was really haunting him. Chu Liyue suddenly turned her head and looked at Rong Xiao. You know who this is? She had an inexplicable intuition that Rong Xiao seemed to know more than she expected. She didn't know where this feeling came from, but judging from Rong Xiao's reaction just now, it seemed that her guess was right. Rong Xiao's thin red lips moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, a shout came from the corner of the street behind them. Your Highness! It was 13's voice. Chu Liyue turned around and saw a slender young man running toward them quickly. His movements were nimble and free. It seemed that he didn't move much, but he was already in front of them. 13 came in the rain, but he was surrounded by a layer of enchantment, so he wasn't worried about getting wet. Because he was still young, Chu Liyue almost never assigned tasks to 13. She only let him focus on cultivation. This also allowed 13 to come and go freely both inside and outside the palace. Today he happened to meet Shangguan Yu. When he heard that it was related to his master, he immediately agreed and left the palace to look for him. When he was still a short distance away from Chu Liyue, 13 shouted excitedly, Your Highness, the retired emperor was worried that you would be out alone for too long. So he asked me to send you an umbrella and take you back to the palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:11. Suddenly, 13's voice stopped abruptly, and he stopped in his tracks. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock. Someone was holding an umbrella for Her Highness. More importantly, he was hugging Her Highness. With such an intimate gesture, anyone could tell that the relationship between the two was not ordinary. You, who are you? 13 had come happily to bring Chu Liyue back to the palace, but when he saw this scene, he felt uncomfortable. Without waiting for Chu Liyue to speak, Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows and said calmly, I'm yours, fiancé. 13's eyes widened in shock, and his mouth dropped open. You're Her Highness's fiancé. Didn't Her Highness just settle Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan Wan? How did she suddenly have a fiancé? Because 13 was young, no one told him about this, so he was especially shocked at first glance. Chu Liyue was thinking, what did 13 say just now? He seemed to have mentioned the retired emperor. Based on Rong Xiao's intelligence, he would have sensed something wrong with this sentence and guessed her identity. You said just now, who asked you to bring you back? Sure enough, Rong Xiao spoke casually and directly. Chu Liyue's eyebrows twitched. 13 was about to reply, but he saw that there was something wrong with Her Highness's eyes, so he covered his mouth. Rong Xiao, I have something to tell you. Chu Liyue originally wanted to find a suitable time to tell him everything, but she didn't expect that the moment the two of them met, she had no choice but to say it now. Rong Xiao looked down at her. There was a trace of embarrassment on his face, but there was an undetectable trace of a smile at the corner of his lips. Was she embarrassed that she had not been honest with him about those things before? Rong Xiao's voice was low. This low rhetorical question seemed to come from his chest, pressing tightly against his heart, and brushing past his eardrums. It was pleasing to the ear and numbing. Chu Liyue blushed slightly, but she held his hand gently and firmly, their fingers intertwined. Come with me. 6 Cloud Street, Chu Estate. The rain had just stopped, and in the quiet and leisurely courtyard, there was already a shallow accumulation of rainwater. Water droplets continuously dripped from the eaves and fell into it, creating a circle of ripples. The air after the rain was moist and sweet. 13 stood outside the door, waiting anxiously and impatiently. From time to time, he would glance at the tightly shut door. Her Highness, and that man had been in there for a long time and still hadn't come out. From His Highness's words, it seemed that he wanted to explain something to that man. However, His Highness was of noble birth and was decisive in killing. Since when did he need to explain so much to others? And, most importantly, that man was actually Her Highness' fiancé. 13 scratched his head. 7th brother, and the others didn't mention it before. He grew up in Shilling City, and was very sure that the man was definitely not from Shilling City. However, judging from the aura around him, he shouldn't be underestimated. 13 looked inside again, and scratched his head. This is what I wanted to tell you. In the room, Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu sat facing each other. Chu Luyue told him everything about her past life and current life. I am Chu Luyue from the Empire of Yaochun, and also from the Shanghai Yu of the Tianling dynasty. She looked at Rong Xiu and said word by word seriously. Previously, I only said that there was an enemy of mine in Shilling City, but I didn't tell you everything clearly because, at that time, I wasn't sure if I could successfully complete what I wanted to do. But now, everything has been settled. I originally wanted to find an opportunity to tell you, but I didn't expect it to happen today. Chu Luyue took a deep breath. Rong Xiu, this is the real me. After saying that, Chu Luyue fell silent and waited quietly for Rong Xiu's reaction. However, unexpectedly, Rong Xiu's face didn't show any shock or surprise. Instead, there was a hint of tenderness in his eyes. He reached out and held her hand tightly. His fingers gently rubbed the back of her hand a few times. Does it hurt? Chu Luyue was stunned. What? Whether it was that day when you rejected me, or everything that happened after that. You must have suffered a lot, right? Rong Xiu looked at her, his eyes deep. He was waiting for her to tell him everything personally, but to her, it was undoubtedly exposing her own scars. Knowing that she had suffered a lot was also a kind of torture for him. Chu Luyue was stunned, but her eyes suddenly became hot. Rong Xiu, you are not angry that I lied to you? Although she didn't mean to deceive him, she had hidden too many things after all. Rong Xiu actually didn't care at all? Hearing that, Rong Xiu shook his head gently, smiled slightly and sighed softly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I have the energy to be angry? Chu Luyue didn't expect Rong Xiu to have such a reaction. In the next moment, Rong Xiu leaned closer and sucked a teardrop from the corner of her eye. Promise me that in the future, don't shoulder anything by yourself. I'll always be there. The previous uneasiness and guilt all disappeared at this moment, and all of it turned into grievances and poured out in torrents. Suddenly, as if the heavy armor had been removed, her whole body relaxed. The suffering and torture that she had experienced in the past seemed to be not worth mentioning now. The heavens gave her pain and disaster, but they also gave her Rong Xiu. Chu Luyue closed her eyes and buried her head in his shoulder, her voice muffled. Okay. After a while, there was a knock on the door outside. 13th's somewhat nervous voice sounded. Your Highness? The rain has stopped for a long time. Should we go back to the palace? In fact, he didn't want to rush at this time, but there were still people waiting in the palace. Chu Luyue's emotions gradually calmed down, and she pulled herself out of Rong Xiu's arms. She almost forgot that 13 was still waiting outside. I wanted to talk to you about something, but it seems that I can't today. Rong Xiu tidied her messy hair and gently rubbed her face. Chu Luyue looked at him, and a white light suddenly flashed in her mind. She vaguely felt that Rong Xiu seemed to want to talk to her about something important, and it was very likely that it was because of his previous identity as the son of God. But 13 was already rushing her, and it was indeed not convenient for her to stay for too long. Chu Luyue could only nod. Then you can stay here for the night. Tomorrow. She paused, raised her eyes slightly, and glanced at Rong Xiu again. Actually, father mentioned to me before that. He said that he wanted to see you. Rong Xiao understood and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. Then I'll visit father-in-law tomorrow. Chu Liyue's face turned red, and then she was a little worried. Won't tomorrow be too soon? There should be some time to prepare for this kind of thing. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes, and a smile flashed across his eyes. His wife didn't seem to have much confidence in her man. Then in 3 days. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:12. After saying goodbye to Rong Xiao, Chu Liyue returned to the palace with Shersan. She was disappointed and worried, but after seeing Rong Xiao, she inexplicably felt relieved. It seemed that with him there was nothing to worry about. When she returned to Zhaoyu Hall, Sheng Guanyu had been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Chu Liyue return safely, Sheng Guanyu breathed a sigh of relief. Ever since the incident 2 years ago, he had become much more sensitive. Chu Liyue had been away for too long, and he would be worried. Although he knew that she had a lot of trump cards now, it was normal for her parents to be worried. Chu Liyue thought about it, and only told Sheng Guanyu that Rong Xiao would come in 3 days. As for Chu Ning being held hostage, she did not mention much. Now she did not even know who the other party was, and telling her father would only make him more worried. However, Sheng Guanyu became more and more curious about Rong Xiao. He wondered what kind of person could be so favored by her. Looking at Chu Liyue's sparkling eyes when she mentioned Rong Xiao, Sheng Guanyu secretly made up his mind. As long as the boy was a good person, he would not object. Everything was for the sake of his daughter's happiness. After sending Sheng Guanyu away, Chu Liyue returned to the study and sat down on a chair. She had experienced too many things today, which made her a little confused. Countless intertwined images flashed through her mind. After a long while, she opened her eyes. Her eyes were calm and serene. Taizu, Chu Liyue respectfully called out. A translucent phantom appeared in front of her. It was Taizu. Girl, what's bothering you? Taizu asked with one hand behind his back. Chu Liyue nodded. The black demon cave you mentioned before. What kind of existence is it? Hearing this, Taizu looked solemn and was silent for a while. Chu Liyue waited quietly. She had some understanding of the various dynasties in Heaven's canopy. Some of them were stronger than the Tianling dynasty, while some were weaker. However, she had never heard of the Black Demon Cave. That's a hidden sect. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Hidden sects. After a long while, Taizu spoke slowly. He let out a long sigh, as if he was recalling something. 1,000 years ago, I was already at the peak of the 9th stage, just one step away from stepping into the deity realm. But even after 10 years, I still haven't succeeded. After that, I left Tianling and traveled the continent. Encountering the Black Demon Cave was actually a pure accident. The experts of the Black Demon Cave are as numerous as the clouds. Even when I was at my peak, I still couldn't be compared to them. I've seen the Black Demon Cave's people move mountains and fill seas. They're truly great experts. Even after 1,000 years, the things that happened back then were still deeply engraved in his mind, as fresh as yesterday. Chu Liyue was also shocked. Taizu was the strongest expert of the Tianling dynasty in 1,000 years. If even he said so, then just how strong were the people of the Black Demon Cave? That day, although that person didn't have a physical body and was only left with a soul, the aura of the Black Demon Cave was extremely strong. That's why I recognized it at a glance. These hidden sects were very strong in cultivation, and most of them had their own distinctive characteristics. As long as you've seen them, you'll be able to recognize them at a glance. But these people are usually very arrogant and rarely enter the world, let alone participate in the disputes between dynasties. Taizu shook his head, looking puzzled. I don't know what's going on this time. Chu Liyue pondered for a moment. That soul has been in Sheng Guanwan's body for a long time, at least a few years. According to what Sheng Guanwan said, she herself doesn't know when that person came into existence. But many of the things she did later were because she was bewitched by that person, including the matter of killing me. Taizu looked at her with a complicated gaze. Actually, that day, I've already sensed that that person seems to be targeting you. Do you know why? Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She still remembered clearly what that person had said at that time. It seemed to be because of the water droplet in her body. Ever since this water droplet transformed into an existence similar to the pill of origin in her body, it had been in this form almost all the time. But that day, under the influence of that man, it transformed into the appearance of a transparent book page again, and faintly felt like it was struggling to be pulled out. But if that person came for this, then why did he target her so early on? Before she died in her previous life, she didn't have this thing on her. It was only after she had been reborn that such an item suddenly appeared in her body out of nowhere. Even now, she still didn't know what it was. She shook her head. That person's attack failed, but he definitely won't give up. He'll come again in the future. Taizu said in a low voice. It's fine if he's alone, but if he implicates others. This was actually what he was most worried about. If the people of Black Demon Cave wanted to attack Tianling, even he might not be able to defeat them. Girl, the most important thing for you now is to improve your cultivation as soon as possible. This way, even if someone wants to trouble you in the future, you'll have the power to deal with it. Taizu frowned. You have too many treasures on you, and any one of them will attract the covetous eyes of countless people. You can hide it for a while, but you can't hide it forever. The only way, and also the best way, was to become stronger by himself. Chu Liyue nodded seriously. You will remember Taizu's teachings. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Liyue got up and packed up, then went to the Yuanhe Palace. The Yuanhe Palace was Shang Guanyu's bedchamber. It was obvious that Shang Guanyu wanted to meet Rong Xiu as Rong Xiu's father by setting the venue here instead of the palace hall, where the other officials would attend court. Although Shang Guanyu was now the emperor, in Shang Guanyu's eyes, whether this marriage could make her happy was the most important thing. Perhaps in the eyes of the world, an emperor's marriage was a matter of state first, followed by family affairs. But in Shang Guanyu's eyes, it was a matter of family first, followed by state affairs. Everywhere she passed, the palace servants bowed respectfully. But just as she walked out of the Yuanhe Palace, she saw someone standing there, as if waiting for someone. Hearing the movement, the person turned around. When he saw Chu Liyue's face, a trace of excitement and joy appeared on the handsome young man's face. He took 2 quick steps forward. Your Majesty. Chu Liyue looked at him strangely. Zhao Zicheng? Why are you here? This was the second son of the Zhao family, also a famous family in Xiling City, but he had left Xiling a few years ago, and she didn't expect him to come back today. Hearing her question, Zhao Zicheng's ears turned red. When I heard that your Majesty had returned, I rushed back day and night, hoping to see your Majesty. He seemed to be very nervous, but his face was full of hope and sincerity. Your Majesty, I'm here today to confess my feelings to you. Previously, because you chose Jiang Yucheng, I didn't say much and left Xiling. But this time, please give Zicheng a chance. The corner of Chu Liyue's eyes twitched. Is he confessing? On the day when I'm going to meet father with my fiancé? Digression. I suddenly found out that a friend of mine had a tumor, so I chatted with him for a long time. Everyone take care of your health, and have regular checkups. Sigh, I'll continue at 6. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 913. Zhao Zicheng didn't seem to notice anything wrong with Chu Liyue's expression, and continued speaking. Because I know that your Majesty has been busy recently, Zicheng has been staying in the residence these few days, and didn't dare to disturb you. But, Zhao Zicheng looked up and quickly glanced at the woman in front of him. His eyes were filled with unconcealable adoration, and his nervous heart was beating wildly. But, Zicheng has admired your Majesty for many years. I'm afraid that if I don't say it this time, I won't have another chance in the future. Zhao Zicheng instantly felt much better after finally speaking his mind. However, his handsome face was stained with a tinge of red. His eyes were filled with hope and uneasiness as he looked at Chu Liyue, as if he was waiting for her answer. Chu Liyue sighed inwardly. To be honest, Zhao Zicheng was very good. Although the Zhao family wasn't considered the top family in Shilling City, they were still officials of the Tianling dynasty for hundreds of years and had a deep foundation. As the second son of the Zhao family's direct descendant, Zhao Ziqing's status was even more precious. Most importantly, he was an extremely outstanding mystic master genius. In the entire Shilling, except for Chu Luyue, almost no one could be compared to him. If Jian Fengqi was a genius who was only one step behind her in alchemy, then Zhao Ziqing was above mystic master level and could fight with her. When she was young, she cultivated with many elders of the imperial family. Jian Fengqi and Zhao Ziqing had been her study companions for a period of time. Unlike Jian Fengqi's arrogant and unbridled personality, Zhao Ziqing was more like a modest gentleman with an introverted and gentle personality. For so many years, everyone in Shilling City praised the second son of the Zhao family when they mentioned him. Even compared to Jiang Yuqing, he was definitely on par in all aspects. Zhao Ziqing, I remember that you are already 27 this year, Chu Luyue said. Zhao Ziqing was stunned for a moment and nodded in confusion. That's right. At this age, you should have married and had children long ago, Chu Luyue said sincerely and calmly. You don't have to waste any more time on me. Zhao Ziqing's originally slightly red face turned white with a swish. A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. Your Majesty, what do you mean? Chu Luyue shook his head. As smart as you are, there's no way you don't know what I mean. If that's the case, don't mention it again in the future. Please leave. With that, Chu Luyue prepared to leave. Zhao Ziqing only hesitated for a moment before he immediately blocked her way again. Your Majesty, Ziqing is sincerely seeking your hand in marriage. Zhao Ziqing tried hard to suppress the nervousness and embarrassment in his heart. Back then, because Jiang Yuqing beat me to it, and you agreed to the engagement with him, I put away my thoughts and left the West Hill alone. Although it's uncomfortable, as long as you're happy, everything else doesn't matter. But now he has betrayed you, and I am filled with regret. Missing it once is already a matter of life and death. I don't want the same thing to happen a second time. Zhao Ziqing was determined to come today. A few years ago, he left heartbroken, thinking that he had helped her, but he didn't expect that in the end, everything would be so absurd. When he heard that she had survived a great disaster and returned from a tribulation, he immediately rushed back. No matter what, he would definitely persevere to the end this time. Although he himself didn't care much about worldly possessions, in terms of background, talent and so on, he was confident that he was definitely one of the most suitable choices for her now. Chu Luyue felt a headache coming on. Zhao Ziqing had a cool and gentle personality, but when this kind of person was stubborn, even a few oxen couldn't pull him back. Zhao Ziqing, I have always understood your feelings. Chu Luyue thought about it, but still decided to tell him the truth. Since many years ago, even if you don't say it, I understand. Zhao Ziqing was actually a very honest person, and didn't know how to hide his feelings. She wasn't stupid. They had spent a few years studying together, and later he entered the imperial court as an official. From time to time, they would see each other in the imperial court or at palace banquets. How could she not know his feelings? It was just that things like feelings could never be forced. Zhao Ziqing was stunned for a moment, and it took him a while to realize what she meant. Looking at the clear eyes of the woman in front of him, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. Although her appearance was slightly different from before, her eyebrows and eyes were still the familiar appearance in his memory. She was still her. These words were a clear rejection, but he didn't want to give up just like that. Can't you give me a chance? Zhao Ziqing spoke with difficulty, as if something in his eyes would shatter at the slightest touch. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of forgetting and letting go of this person after so many years of thinking. If he could do it, he wouldn't be standing here today. Just one time and... No. A low and cold man's voice suddenly came from behind. Although the tone was light, there was a faint sharp pressure in the words. Zhao Ziqing turned around and saw a man in white. He didn't know when, but he had appeared not far behind him. The man looked to be in his early 20s. He was tall and wore a white robe. The breeze blew the corner of his robe, making him look like a banished immortal. But what was even more shocking was his appearance. His facial features were as if they were carefully carved and cast by the heavens. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't perfect. He was noble and unparalleled, but there was also a trace of demonic aura. Just by standing there, he could easily take away all the colors between heaven and earth. Even Zhao Zicheng had to admit that this person's appearance and aura was really something he had never seen before in his life. You are. Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curled into a faint smile. I am yours, fiancé, Rong Xiu. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:14. It was a simple sentence, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder. It smashed into Zhao Zicheng's heart. His mind went blank for a moment. What did you say? He was her fiancé. Didn't she just come back? When he looked back in shock, only to see the woman who had been distant and cold to him, just now unconsciously smile after seeing the person who came. Thousands of stars seemed to shine in her eyes. At this moment, Zhao Zicheng's heart turned cold. Rong Xiu. Chu Liyue didn't expect him to come so quickly, and walked over. Why are you here so early? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. Since I want to meet my father-in-law, I naturally have to be early. Besides, if I came late, wouldn't I miss a good show? Chu Liyue glared at him. How could he joke with her at this time? She had clearly rejected him just now. Rong Xiu looked at her angry and coquettish expression, and smiled slightly. His heart itched slightly, and he wanted to hug her directly. But when he thought that this was the Tianling Palace, and there were many palace servants around to serve them, he suppressed the urge and just held her hand. Seeing the two of them clasped hands, Zhao Zicheng finally reacted. He frowned subconsciously. Anyone could see that the two of them were very close. Fiancé, why hadn't he heard of it before? Zhao Zicheng had specially asked his father a few days ago to sound out Sheng Guanyu, but he didn't mention it at that time. Could it be someone she met in the past 2 years? If he remembered correctly, she had returned from an empire called Yao Chen outside Heaven's Canopy. This man. You don't seem to be from West Hill. Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath and tried to make himself look calm. Not to mention West Hill, even in the entire Tianling, there was no Rong family among the famous families. There was a high probability that it was from Yao Chen. Chu Liyue didn't want to say too much to Zhao Zicheng, so she said, Father should be waiting for me. Father should be waiting inside, so I'll go in with Rong Xiu first. Second young master Zhao, you should go back too. Zhao Zicheng looked at Rong Xiu insistently. Since you're Her Majesty's fiancé, there's nothing you can't say about your family background, right? He was going to go against Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu looked at Chu Liyue comfortingly and smiled. I'm 7th Prince Yao Chen Rong Xiu. He was indeed from of Yao Chen's people. Of course. Of the ROF of course. Of the Tianling. Of the Tianling of the Emperor of the Emperors. Of his of the difference in status between the two of them was too great. Not to mention him. Even the officials of the imperial court wouldn't agree to this marriage. Zhao Zicheng couldn't help but look at Chu Liyue. Of course she knew this, but she was still so insistent. It was enough to prove that she was truly moved by this man. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists tightly, feeling extremely conflicted. In the early years, it was Jiang Yuqing who was one step ahead. Now there was Rong Xiu. It seemed that he was always a little short of success every time. He really couldn't take it lying down. I am the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Zhao Zicheng. Although Zhao Zicheng hadn't stayed in West Hill for the past few years, he hadn't resigned from his position. His journey had been smooth, and he had already become an assistant minister at such a young age. But in fact, this title was not worth mentioning compared to his aristocratic background. There were several assistant ministers of the Ministry of Rights, but there was only one second young master of the Zhao family. Zhao Zicheng had no intention of using his background to suppress others. He only wanted to use his official position to try and pressure the other party. When ordinary people heard this, it was inevitable that they would be surprised and in admiration. But after he finished speaking, the man opposite him only nodded with an indifferent expression, as if he didn't care. Second young master Zhao, I've heard of you. Chu Luyue and Zhao Zicheng both looked at him in surprise. Chu Luyue thought that Rong Xiao had only been to West Hill once before, and Zhao Zicheng wasn't here at that time. How could he have heard of Zhao Zicheng's name? Zhao Zicheng thought to himself. Judging from this Rong Xiao's tone, he seems to know something about me. But why doesn't he care at all? Perhaps he doesn't know much about the situation in West Hill? If that's the case, it would explain his series of reactions. Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath. I have a few words that I would like to talk to young Master Rong alone. Is it convenient for you? Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows and nodded. Why not? Seeing that the atmosphere was getting strange, Chu Luyue grabbed Rong Xiao. If you have something to say it here. It's most likely related to me. Why can't I listen? Zhao Zicheng looked at her hesitantly. Your Majesty, Rong Xiao and I are engaged. What can I not listen to? Second young Master Zhao, if you have something to say, please speak your mind. Rong Xiao blinked, and a faint smile flashed across his eyes. Well, it's rare to see her supporting me like this. It feels good. Zhao Zicheng's eyes dimmed for a moment. Even Jiang Yuqing back then, she didn't seem to have spoken up for me like this. She's protecting me like this. It's obvious that she's really in love. On the other hand, Rong Xiao was standing behind her, as if he was enjoying this woman's protection of him with a clear conscience. Zhao Zicheng suddenly became angry. If it's already like this, won't it be worse in the future? This marriage is not worth it to me. Zhao Zicheng's expression became much more serious. Since your Majesty has said so, I will not mince my words. Young Master Rong, if you are sincere to Her Majesty, then please leave her now and don't have anything to do with her anymore. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere suddenly turned cold. The space around them seemed to freeze inch by inch. Chu Luyue could clearly feel an extremely cold aura spreading from Rong Xiao's body. For a moment, Zhao Zicheng felt an extremely dangerous killing intent. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. His hair stood on end. But in the blink of an eye, this feeling quickly disappeared without a trace. It was as if everything was just an illusion. Rong Xiao smiled, but his voice was so cold that it made one's heart tremble. Oh, what if I say no? Zhao Zicheng knew that he would definitely not agree after hearing this, so he wasn't discouraged and continued speaking. Perhaps you two were very close in the past, but now, as you can see, she is already the Tianling Emperor. She needs to marry someone of the same status, but you don't have this right. If you really like her and cherish her, then for her own good, you should cancel this marriage and leave. Don't tell me you don't know what self-awareness is. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:15. Chu Luyue's expression turned cold. Zhao Zicheng. Rong Xiao held her hand and gave her a reassuring glance. Then he chuckled, as if he didn't care about Zhao Zicheng's words, and didn't show any anger at being provoked. If I can prove that I'm worthy of you, Second young Master Zhao will take back your words and promise not to disturb you in the future. How about it? Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Rong Xiao to not only not be angry, but also take the initiative to say such a thing. He couldn't help but frown and ask in return. Proof? What proof do you have? Rong Xiao's expression was indifferent. He stood there, as ethereal and cold as a landscape painting, exuding an indescribable charm. Whatever you can think of, just do it. His voice was light and nonchalant, as if he didn't take this matter to heart at all. This was the kind of confidence that could only come from a person with great strength. Zhao Zicheng's first reaction was that it was absurd. This Rong Xiao truly didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He even dared to say such a thing. Did he know what kind of existence the Tianling dynasty was? Any one of the people here might be able to easily crush him. This made Zhao Zicheng even more dissatisfied and indignant. Such an arrogant and domineering man didn't deserve to be with her. Even if she didn't like him, Zhao Zicheng, and chose other outstanding young talents, he had nothing to say. But this Rong Xiao couldn't do it. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists and said, "All right, since you dare to face it head-on, this young master won't deliberately make things difficult for you. One's background can't be chosen, so there's no need to compare. as long as you can prove that you're outstanding enough. May I ask, young Master Rong, what kind of cultivation do you practice? Martial artist, mystic master, or celestial physician? Rong Xiu raised his brows slightly. May I know which one second young Master Zhao is best at? Zhao Zicheng froze for a moment, then straightened his body and said with a slightly solemn expression, Mystic Master. He actually dabbled in the other two fields, but comparatively speaking, his talent as a mystic master was the best. His cultivation as a mystic master was also the highest. Then I'll be a mystic cultivator, Rong Xiu said indifferently. There was a moment of silence. After a moment, Zhao Zicheng opened his eyes slightly and asked in surprise and shock. Mystic cultivator? Are you sure? He had already said that he was best at being a Xian master, but Rong Xiu just had to choose this. I'm sure. Of course, if second young Master Zhao wanted to compete in other aspects, Rong Xiu would naturally accompany him to the end. Rong Xiu's expression was calm, and there was a hint of a smile on his lips. He seemed to be very patient. His reaction completely provoked Zhao Zicheng. Good. That was a Xian master. If you can defeat me from now on, I will never get involved in these matters again. Also from now on, stay away from Yu'er, Rong Xiu reminded. Zhao Zicheng choked. All right. Hearing the answer, Rong Xiu nodded with satisfaction. Chu Luiyue glanced at Rong Xiu. This is on purpose. Why do I feel that Rong Xiu deliberately induced Zhao Zicheng to say these words? Zhao Zicheng composed himself. In that case, let's make an appointment. Let's do it today. Before he finished speaking, a low and powerful voice came from not far away. They looked back and saw that Shang Guanyu had already walked out of Yuanhe Hall. The words just now came from his mouth. Father! Chu Luiyue shouted. Rong Xiu cupped his fists and bowed to Shang Guanyu. Rong Xiu greets your majesty. Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Shang Guanyu to appear at this time. Thinking that he seemed to have heard everything just now, he was a little nervous and also bowed. Shock flashed across Shang Guanyu's eyes as he sized Rong Xiu up, but there was also a tinge of admiration. He waited in Yuanhe Hall for a long time, but no one came. Later, he heard from the palace servants that a few people were quarreling outside, so he planned to come out and take a look. At first glance, he saw his baby Yu'er. Then, he turned his gaze and saw another man in white standing beside her. Seeing that the two were standing very close to each other, he had already guessed the identity of this person. Although he only saw the back of Rong Xiu just now, Shang Guanyu could still vaguely sense the noble and imposing aura of Rong Xiu. He was a little surprised. Even the ordinary children of the aristocratic families couldn't compare to such an imposing manner. He had been sitting on the throne for a long time, so he had an excellent eye for people. Rong Xiu exuded a noble aura that only a person of high status would have. He had seen Emperor Yaochen a few times, but he couldn't be compared to this person. He didn't seem like someone who could be raised by an existence like Emperor Yaochen. So you're Rong Xiu? Standing close to him and sizing him up, Shang Guanyu finally saw Rong Xiu's face clearly. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Isn't he too good-looking? Even he had to admit that he'd never seen such a peerlessly noble appearance that was like an immortal's in his life. Even Jiang Yuqing, who was famous for being the most handsome man in Xiling, paled in comparison to her instantly. In comparison, it was like a firefly competing with the sun and the moon. The contrast was simply tragic. With just one look, Shang Guanyu immediately understood why his daughter liked him. With such a face, he was probably a young girl who was in love. Her heart would be moved at the sight of him. If he hadn't eavesdropped for a while just now and felt that this man was quite responsible and courageous, Shang Guanyu almost suspected that his baby daughter was simply bewitched by this devilish face. Father, Rong Xiu and I were going to visit you, but we didn't expect to meet second young Master Zhao. We were delayed for a while. You won't be angry, right? Chu Luiyue blinked. Shang Guanyu laughed. He knew that she was speaking up for Rong Xiu, but he felt inexplicably unhappy when he saw how protective she was of Rong Xiu. Do you think your father is such a petty person? Zhao Zicheng's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. So they had made an appointment long ago? Then wouldn't he thinking of this? Zhao Zicheng suddenly felt even more nervous. Shang Guanyu looked at Zhao Zicheng and sighed in his heart. Although Zhao Zicheng was outstanding in all aspects, what could he do if Yu didn't like him? Back then, Zhao Zicheng left West Hill sadly because of the engagement between Yu and Jiang Yuqing. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't know. Now that Jiang Yuqing was defeated and imprisoned, Zhao Zicheng still had feelings for Yu, and specially came to ask for her hand in marriage. There was nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Since you have made an appointment, there's no time like the present. Let's do it today. He also wanted to see how powerful Rong Xiu was. Yu had praised him before, but he still didn't quite believe it. Only when he saw it with his own eyes could he be sure. Coincidentally, there's a martial arts field behind Yuanha Hall. Let's do it there. Since Shang Guanyu had said so, the rest of the people naturally wouldn't object. Everyone began to walk into Yuanha Hall. Chu Luyue pulled Rong Xiu's sleeve and whispered, "Rong Xiu, when did you cultivate as a Xian master? Zhao Zicheng is very talented in this aspect. Can you do it?" Mobile users, please browse for a more high-quality reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 916. When Rong Xiu heard this, his footsteps paused slightly. He glanced at her and raised his eyebrows slightly. A faint light flashed across his deep phoenix eyes. For some reason, Chu Luyue suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. It was extremely dangerous. He didn't open his mouth, but a voice as weak as a fly clearly entered her ears. "Don't say such things in the future." Chu Luyue blinked and vaguely felt that she had committed a huge taboo. What did I just say? Put your heart back in your stomach. Rong Xiu gave his wife a warning look. Your man is very good at everything. Chu Luyue's face heated up slightly, and her ears burned a little. She immediately looked away and followed the crowd forward. TSK, wasn't she also worried about him? After all, they had known each other for so long, but she still didn't know that Rong Xiu was actually a mystic cultivator. Although she knew that Rong Xiu was very strong in the past, she had always thought that he was only a martial artist. Now that she was going to compete with Zhao Zicheng as a mystic cultivator, she really didn't have any confidence. Zhao Zicheng's talent in this aspect was only slightly weaker than hers. After so many years of diligent cultivation, it wasn't hard to imagine how powerful his cultivation had become as a mystic cultivator. Rong Xiu was actually so calm, however. A certain someone who had been warned by Yin Zheng naturally didn't dare to ask any more questions. Since he had such a reaction, he should have some confidence. Seeing Rong Xiu's calm and confident appearance, as if he didn't take this matter seriously, Chu Luyue, who was originally a little worried, gradually relaxed. This man seemed to have never needed her to worry about. Yuanha Hall, martial arts training field in the backyard. Rong Xiu and Zhao Zicheng stood facing each other. Shang Guanyu and Chu Luyue sat below the field. Around them stood the black cavalry who were in charge of guarding. It was quiet all around. Everyone's gaze was focused on the two people on the field. Some were curious, while others were doubtful. Now, everyone here already knew that the man in white, Rong Xiu, was Her Majesty's fiancé. Since Zhao Zicheng failed to marry Her Majesty, the two of them decided to compete. Since this matter involved Chu Luyue, it would naturally cause a huge commotion. At this moment, although everyone looked very calm on the surface, their hearts were already surging with waves. Outside the palace gates in the distance, some palace servants were huddled together, cautiously looking in this direction. I heard that the man in white was Her Majesty's fiancé in country Yaochun. I think he's the 7th prince of country Yaochun. Yaochun? Isn't that a vassal state of Tianling? Even though he is a prince, his status doesn't match His Majesty's. But such a graceful appearance is truly rare in the world. Previously, I thought that second young master Zhao was quite good. However, I don't know why, but when I compare the two of them, I actually feel that second young master Zhao is slightly inferior. These are all external things, they're not that important. Her Majesty's status is noble. Even if she agrees, I'm afraid the courtiers won't nod their heads easily. When second young master Zhao left Xiling, he was already a level 7 mystic master. After a few years, I wonder how much he has improved. I'm afraid this duel is going to be difficult. Zhao Ziqing looked at Rong Xiu opposite him and cupped his fists. Please, Rong Xiu nodded indifferently. Seeing how calm he was, Zhao Ziqing frowned. I'll let him be arrogant for a while longer. When we really fight, he'll know what it means to say that there's always someone better than you. There are some people that a mere 7th prince of Yaochen can't obtain. Zhao Ziqing held his breath and focused. He slightly staggered his feet and raised his hand. A silver force as thick as a thumb instantly flew out from his palm. That force was extremely pure. It danced lightly in the wind, but it contained a powerful pressure. Then, Zhao Ziqing waved his hands. That force actually split into hundreds of forces in an instant. Moreover, each of them was the same thickness as the first one. The aura of each force was completely the same. To be able to gather these forces together and quickly split them up again, it was enough to prove that Zhao Ziqing's control of the force was already at the peak of perfection. Countless silver lines circled around his hands. They were like swimming fishes, swift and agile. Then, these lines began to intertwine and overlap, quickly forming a huge circular Xian formation. As the pattern on the Xian formation became more and more complex, Zhao Ziqing's aura also rose rapidly. In just a few breaths of time, the silver Xian formation was already so complicated that it was dazzling. Buzz! A heavy pressure spread out from the Xian formation. As it slowly rotated, the void at the edge of it was actually silently cut open by black spatial cracks. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the power of the Xian formation was. Sheng Guanyu was very surprised. He sat up slightly and stared at the Xian formation. I really didn't expect. Zhao Ziqing has already broken through to become a level 8 mystic master. With such pressure, he was definitely a level 8 mystic master. It could be seen that he had not slacked off in the past few years, and had been cultivating with all his might. Calculating his age, he was not even 30 years old this year. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there were very few people who could break through to level 8 mystic master at this time. After saying that, Sheng Guanyu turned his gaze and looked at Rong Xiu opposite him. He was slightly stunned. Rong Xiu stood tall and slender with one hand behind his back, looking calm and composed. He actually hasn't moved yet? When Zhao Ziqing had already started, and even the high-level Xian formation was about to be completed, Rong Xiu actually didn't react at all? Is he planning to give up directly? But even if his strength is not as good as Zhao Ziqing's, he should at least try his best, right? What does he mean by standing still like this? Sheng Guanyu couldn't help but frown. Chu Luyue looked at this scene and felt very strange, but more than that, she was curious. To be honest, until now, she still didn't know what level Rong Xiu's strength was at. Moreover, today was a Mystic Master competition. She really wanted to see how strong Rong Xiu was in this aspect. Zhao Ziqing took in all of Rong Xiu's reactions. His mood, which was already bad, instantly became even worse. This scene looked like he was going all out, but Rong Xiu didn't care about it at all. Zhao Ziqing pursed his lips and injected another stream of force into the Xian formation. A huge figure appeared on the Xian formation. At first glance, it looked like a tiger. Startling tiger formation. Roar! Following this earth-shattering roar, the ferocious tiger suddenly leaped out and went straight for Rong Xiu. In the next moment, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of Rong Xiu. It was clearly a white lion. Its icy blue eyes stared coldly at the ferocious tiger phantom as it raised its paw indifferently. Swoosh! The white light was like a blade, and in an instant, it tore the incomparably ferocious phantom into pieces. Rong Xiu looked up, and his thin lips curved up as he smiled. This won't do. Let's change it to someone I can fight. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 917. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before the crowd could realize what had happened, they saw the white tiger illusion, which had an imposing aura, dissipate in an instant. At this moment, even the Xian formation started to crack. Crack! The originally complicated and powerful Xian formation was instantly covered with spiderweb-like cracks. Zhao Ziqing's heart sank as he quickly retreated. The moment he left his original spot, The huge silver Xian formation shattered instantly. Boom! With a loud bang, the Xian formation turned into countless dazzling rays of light that scattered in all directions. The terrifying impact wreaked havoc in all directions. Zhao Ziqing only felt a tightness in his chest, and the pressure on his shoulders was as heavy as 2 mountains. But at this moment, he no longer had the mood to care about this. He only looked at the Rongxiao in horror. How could this be? How could this be? The Rongxiao didn't even make a move. He only sent out a magical beast, and easily destroyed the Xian formation that he had painstakingly set up. And the Rongxiao's words made him even more embarrassed. His face was red and white, and the blood in his chest was surging. He originally thought that he could easily finish off the other party with one move, but he didn't expect that he would be the one at a disadvantage in the end. He was shocked and anxious, and couldn't help but look at the white lion in front of the Rongxiao. Its body was snow white, and only its eyes were ice blue. Its entire body carried a dense chill. Just by standing there quietly, the ground beneath it was already covered with a layer of frost. This is your contracted magical beast? Zhao Ziqing asked in disbelief. From the attack just now, this white lion's rank was at least 8th grade, or even higher. It wasn't that Zhao Ziqing had never seen a higher-ranked magical beast. After all, Chu Liyue's 9-colored heavenly pheasant was 9th grade. And in the next few years, when he was traveling outside, he was lucky enough to see it once or twice. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but the pressure and aura around this white lion seemed to be even stronger than the 9th grade magical beasts he had seen before. Just as this absurd and terrifying thought appeared, Zhao Ziqing immediately extinguished it. Impossible. Any contract between a magical beast and a human had to be based on the conditions. Generally speaking, only when a cultivator was powerful enough would he be able to make a contract with a magical beast willingly. If this white lion was really that Rongxiao's strength, Zhao Ziqing closed his eyes tightly, trying to get rid of these distracting thoughts, but his back was still drenched in cold sweat. Rongxiao was probably much stronger than he had expected. Chu Liyue was originally watching leisurely from the side. When he saw Xue come out, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Judging from Xue's attack just now, its strength was almost on par with a 9th grade magical beast. She remembered that when they first met, Xue was indeed a high-level magical beast, but it was only around the 7th rank. How did it suddenly become so much stronger? One had to know that the grade of a magical beast was determined from birth. Only a very small number of magical beasts could increase their grade through continuous breakthroughs. And all of those magical beasts were existences with extremely powerful bloodlines. Moreover, even if Xue originally had this potential, it seemed a little impossible for it to break through to this realm in such a short time. Chu Liyue touched his chin and narrowed his eyes. Could it be that Xue had deliberately hidden its strength in the past? Or it actually hadn't shown its true realm yet? At this moment, Rongxiao chuckled and nodded. That's right. On this point, I think I should be worthy of you, Dead silence. Everyone present looked at Rongxiao in shock and speechlessness. What did he mean by that? Now, in the entire Tianling, who didn't know that Chu Liyue had returned from the death tribulation and ascended to the throne, and a divine beast was following by her side, the red-tailed red phoenix. Didn't Rongxiao mean that his contracted magical beast was also a divine beast? This time, Sheng Guanyu finally couldn't hold back and looked at Chu Liyue. You or he actually contracted a divine beast? Why didn't you say before? Just this point alone was enough to earn him a lot of points. After all, in the entire Tianling dynasty, only Chu Liyue had a divine beast. Chu Liyue was speechless. She didn't know either. At this time, Sheng Guanyu was still looking at the field, so he didn't notice Chu Liyue's expression and stroked his beard. When did a prince from the empire of Yao Chen become so powerful? No wonder he's so confident. Chu Liyue was speechless. Actually, she wanted to ask more. In an instant, countless images appeared in her mind. She used to think that Xue was smart and cute, but she never thought that it was actually a divine beast. The key was that in her knowledge, there didn't seem to be a divine beast that looked like a white lion. Rong Xiao had never told her this. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. Even Xue Xue's identity and strength were so shocking. What about Rong Xiao? Zhao Ziqing never expected that Rong Xiao would casually summon a divine beast. Looking at the white lion, his face was still full of disbelief. A divine beast? What kind of person could make a contract with it? Didn't they say that Rong Xiao came from an ordinary background? Where did this divine beast come from? Zhao Ziqing faintly felt uneasy. But at this time, the bet had been set, and the two sides had already started fighting. It was absolutely impossible to stop. He forced himself to calm down, adjust his breath, and began to reconstruct the Xian formation. Previously, he thought that he could win easily, so he didn't use his full strength in the first move. But now they had to be prepared for battle. Just as Zhao Ziqing began to construct the second Xian formation, a few figures suddenly rushed from the sky outside the palace gate. Your Majesty! Chu Luiyue and Sheng Guanyu turned their heads at the same time, and saw Elder Chen Ku and a few others coming together. Elder Chen Ku was the first to land. He quickly ran to Chu Luiyue and Sheng Guanyu and asked nervously, Your Majesty, what happened here? Why was there such a big commotion just now? A few days ago, a big event had just happened in the palace, and their minds were still in a highly sensitive period. Therefore, when they heard the commotion just now, they immediately rushed over, thinking that it was another fight. After asking, Elder Chen Ku and a few others quickly looked around, but found that there was nothing wrong here. On the training field next to them, there were two people confronting each other. Nothing, it's just these two guys fighting. Sheng Guanyu waved his hand, indicating that they didn't need to be nervous. Elder Chen Ku and a few others heaved a sigh of relief. But when they saw the faces of the two people, they were shocked again. What's going on? One of them was Zhao Ziqing. Judging from his breath, the commotion just now was caused by him. And the man in white opposite him. A few people wanted to ask, but they felt that the atmosphere was not right, so they all kept quiet and looked at the field. At this time, Zhao Ziqing's second Xian formation was completed. The pressure on it was obviously much stronger than before. He took a deep breath and used all his strength to send out the Xian formation. One Yang formation. Digression 6 o'clock. Then he just found that a few chapters were blocked. I'll change the text. Woo. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:18. Above the Xian formation, rays of light gathered and slowly rose like a sun. Blinding light shot out from above, making it hard for people to open their eyes. The temperature of the surrounding space suddenly rose. Almost everyone who was standing nearby could feel the burning pain. Elder Chen Ku looked solemn. With a wave of his sleeve, he immediately set up a barrier around the martial arts field. Are the two of them really going to destroy this place completely? He muttered softly with a trace of shock in his eyes. Although the martial arts field in Yuanhe Hall was meticulously built and had a strong endurance, Zhao Ziqing was already a level 8 Xian master. Now that he executed this attack with all his strength, it naturally couldn't be underestimated. There was also the man in white beside him, and the white lion beside him. Although he didn't know the identity of this person, judging from the fact that he could easily deal with Zhao Ziqing's Xian formation, he was also extremely powerful. If the two of them really fought, it would really be. Sheng Guanyu snorted when he heard that. Now that it was related to Yu how could the two of them hold back? However, at first, he was worried that Rong Xiao wasn't Zhao Ziqing's match, and that Yu would be embarrassed if he lost. But now, he felt that he was worrying too much. This Rong Xiao was able to contract with the divine beast, so he might have some other trump cards. But how could the seventh prince of country Yao Qin be so capable? Due to the impact of the Xian formation, there were already charred marks on the ground. It wasn't hard to imagine how terrifying it would be if all the energy on the ground were to hit one person. The force in Zhao Ziqing's body surged wildly, and his face was slightly pale. This Xian formation was a level 8 Xian formation, and it was also the highest level Xian formation that he could execute. In order to study the Xian formation thoroughly, He had spent a total of 3 years. Normally, even when he was fighting with others, he rarely used this move. Because with his current strength, executing this move would consume a lot of his energy. After using this move, regardless of the outcome, he basically wouldn't have the strength to continue fighting. In other words, he could only win if this move won. He drew the last stroke of the Xian formation with difficulty and immediately pushed it forward. Go! A profound formation that was as dazzling as the sun quickly crushed towards Rongxiao. Everywhere it passed, the ground was scorched black, and even the air seemed to be burning. The distance between the two of them wasn't far to begin with, and Zhao Zicheng had used all his strength in this attack. So in the blink of an eye, the Xian formation had already rushed to a distance of 5 steps away from Rongxiao. The berserk energy wreaked havoc and intertwined above the profound formation, and it even stirred up a gale. The corners of Rongxiao's clothes fluttered in the wind. As they fluttered, faint golden patterns could be vaguely seen, like the sparkling ripples on a clear lake in a starry night. At this moment he finally moved. He raised his right hand and drew a line in the air with his slender fingers. A streak of silver light instantly appeared in front of him. Then his finger moved slightly and drew another line vertically. Just like that, the two silver origin powers intertwined to form a cross in front of him. This cross was only slightly bigger than a person's palm. Compared to Zhao Zicheng's Xian formation, it was so small that it wasn't even worth mentioning. Zhao Zicheng stared at him. Isn't it a little too late for you to start building a Xian formation now? In the end, he was too careless. Rongxiao looked up slightly, and his thin lips curled into a smile. I'm already done. Zhao Zicheng was stunned. What? Already done? Just because of this little cross? What kind of Xian formation was this? Even a level 1 Xian master wouldn't be able to draw 2 lines so easily and call it a Xian formation. It could be seen that this Rongxiao really didn't know anything about Xian masters. Since that was the case, why did he have to choose a Xian master level to fight with him? Could it be that he just wanted to vent his anger because he was unconvinced? But what was the use of losing like this? Zhao Zicheng couldn't help but feel annoyed. A man with such mediocre strength and character didn't deserve to stand by her side. If you want to prove your strength, there are plenty of ways. Why do you have to do this? Before Zhao Zicheng could finish speaking, he saw Rongxiao turn his wrist and push out the cross. From afar, it looked like a silver butterfly that was about to take flight. That butterfly flew past lightly and quickly arrived in front of the huge Xian formation. Then it directly passed through it. Chi! A faint sound was heard. Zhao Zicheng's voice stopped abruptly. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock, and almost suspected that he had seen wrongly. That little cross, did it directly penetrate his profound formation? One had to know that the One-Yang formation contained an extremely abundant amount of force, and couldn't be broken so easily. Furthermore, that thing, right at this moment, that terrifying Xian formation suddenly stopped 3 steps away from Rongxiao. In the next moment, the light on the Xian formation quickly dimmed and was covered by a thick layer of ice. Zhao Zicheng suddenly felt a strong sense of uneasiness. No, crack! The crisp sound of something shattering resounded in the field. After that, the Xian formation shattered into countless pieces. It suddenly dissipated. Puffed! Zhao Zicheng was severely injured, and his body shook violently. He spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered a step back, almost falling down. The aura around him quickly withered, and his entire body seemed to have been drained of all his strength and spirit. Only that pair of eyes that were filled with shock and horror showed his current mood. You. He opened his mouth with difficulty, and could only smell the stench of rust in his mouth. He wasn't the only one. Everyone at the scene was astonished. Just now, Rongxiao actually used that small cross Xian formation to defeat Zhao Zicheng. Swoosh! That cross circled half a circle in the air and flew back. Rongxiao raised his hand and easily caught it with his slender fingers. The whole process was as simple as throwing out a dart. There was dead silence. Rongxiao seemed to be unaware of the surrounding people's reactions, and looked at Zhao Zicheng. Do you admit defeat? His tone was light and his expression was calm. Looking at that pair of deep and cold phoenix eyes, It seemed to hide countless unfathomable stormy waves. Zhao Zicheng's heart trembled violently. At this moment he finally confirmed that Rong Xiao was indeed far stronger than him. Others might not know, but just now, when his Xian formation broke, he clearly felt an unparalleled pressure spreading out from that cross-Xian formation. That was indeed a Xian formation. If he guessed correctly, there was an even higher level Xian formation, hidden within those two streams of light. However, Rong Xiao did not open it. But it was enough to deal with him. Zhao Zicheng closed his eyes. I admit defeat. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 919. Zhao Zicheng actually admitted defeat just like that. The moment he said that, everyone had a complicated expression on their faces. Actually, they could already foresee this outcome when they saw the previous scene. Zhao Zicheng clearly didn't have the strength to continue fighting, and he had no chance of winning if this dragged on. He was severely injured, but Rong Xiao didn't even move a single step from the beginning to the end. Looking at the entire scene, he merely raised his hand and casually swiped twice. What was the point of continuing the fight? It was only right for him to admit defeat now. But who would have expected such an outcome 15 minutes ago? Zhao Zicheng was a level 8 Xian master. Elder Chen Ke, did you see it clearly just now? Was that a Xian formation or not? A few elders from the royal family couldn't help but ask softly. Elder Chen Ke frowned and took a deep breath. That was indeed a Xian formation. Hearing this, the elders looked at each other in dismay. But how can a Xian formation be like that? It's just two forces intertwined. How can it break a level 8 Xian formation so easily? Elder Chen Ke stared at Rong Xiao in the arena and didn't explain further. Why? Why else could it be? Naturally, it was because the cross-Xian formation executed by Rong Xiao was stronger than Zhao Zicheng's. Generally speaking, the higher the level of a Xian master, the better their control over their force. Under such circumstances, the more complicated the Xian formation was, the stronger its power. This was also why everyone was puzzled by Rong Xiao's victory. In the eyes of ordinary people, that thing of his might not even be considered a Xian formation, but it clearly contained a power that was stronger than a level 8 Xian formation, and it easily destroyed it. Elder Chen Ke faintly recalled that there was once a rumor that a top-notch Xian master could turn complex Xian formations into extremely simple diagrams, and they could also possess terrifying power. Could it be Rong Xiao was like that? But those who could reach such a level were all. Where exactly did this Rong Xiao come from? Elder Chen Ke couldn't help but ask. He is the 7th prince of country Yao Chun, and also Yuer's fiancé. Shen Guanyu also came back to his senses at this time. Hearing Elder Chen Ke's question in a low voice, he answered solemnly. The elders were all taken aback. Yao Chen? Isn't that the place where Chu Luwe came back? It seemed to be just a vassal country of Tianling. How could there be such a strong person? Shen Guanyu let out a long sigh, but the waves in his heart still hadn't calmed down. He looked at Rong Xiao with admiration in his eyes. He glanced at Chu Luwe and sighed meaningfully. Yuer's words are true. This Rong Xiao's talent and strength were indeed not inferior to hers. Just her talent as a mystic cultivator was enough to crush Zhao Zicheng. Not to mention the fact that he had formed a contract with the divine beast. Even if he didn't have a high status, having this was enough. That trace of doubt from before had completely dissipated at this moment. Shen Guanyu's heart was finally at ease. Chu Luyue blinked her eyes and didn't know whether to laugh or cry for a moment. In fact, even she didn't know that Rong Xiao was so strong in this aspect. Even she might not be able to withstand that blow just now. Rong Xiao, how did he cultivate to such a level? Shen Guanyu stood up and looked at Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao, you. Very good. Rong Xiao nodded with a smile and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, you flatter me. How is that a compliment? Shen Guanyu had a good first impression of Rong Xiao. Now that he had witnessed his strength with his own eyes, he admired him even more. You are worthy of it. Rong Xiao's eyebrows moved slightly, and the smile in his eyes deepened. It seemed that today's visit to his father-in-law was quite successful. Shen Guanyu turned his gaze and looked at Zhao Zicheng. Come, help second young master Zhao to have a good rest. Zhao Ziqing's face turned red and white. Thank you for your kindness, your majesty. Ziqing is fine, and can go back on his own. It was enough to lose this round. If he had to be helped away again, he would lose face. Zhao Ziqing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, gritted his teeth, and looked up at Rong Xiao. You are indeed strong. There was no sarcasm or jealousy in this sentence. It came from the bottom of his heart. He was really convinced. I admit that I am not as strong as you. I admit defeat. Tomorrow, I will leave West Hill and won't disturb you anymore. When he said this, Zhao Ziqing felt as if his heart had been pierced by countless silver needles. His heart was filled with pain. He turned his head and glanced at Chu Luiyue. A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Then he smiled. Although he didn't get what he wanted this time, he didn't regret it. He had said and done what he needed to do. He had no regrets. Please, treat her well in the future. Zhao Ziqing covered his chest and coughed violently. Rong Xiao's eyes darkened. She is the person in my heart. I will naturally cherish her 1,000 times more than anyone else. Zhao Ziqing laughed self-deprecatingly. That's true. I worried too much. This man was completely different from Jiang Yuqing. He could give her the best. Thinking of this, Zhao Ziqing turned and left. Rong Xiao also walked toward Chu Luiyue. After taking 2 steps, Zhao Ziqing stopped again. He turned around and asked hesitantly, Can I ask you a question? Rong Xiao looked sideways. Zhao Ziqing held his breath and asked, How? How did you cultivate to this level? Rong Xiao thought of something, and a faint smile suddenly appeared on his face. You are taught me. He had no interest in being a mystic master. He only practiced to accompany her for a while. Digression, Rong Xiao. God knows how many skills I learned to pursue my wife. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 920. Zhao Ziqing choked, and felt that Rong Xiao was joking. Back then, Shang Guanyu did have astonishing talent in mystic cultivation, but she was also a level 8 mystic cultivator back then. It was impossible for her to teach someone like Rong Xiao, who could crush level 8 mystic cultivators. It seemed like he didn't want to say it. However, Zhao Ziqing didn't mind. The cultivation of mystic cultivators was different from that of martial artists. They usually needed a master to teach them step by step. This way, the master-disciple relationship would be closer. Rong Xiao might have his own considerations for not telling him his master. After all, there were indeed many reclusive experts in this world who didn't like to show their faces in public and didn't like to casually reveal their identities. To be able to nurture a disciple like Rong Xiao, he must not be a simple person. Zhao Ziqing cupped his hands and didn't ask any more questions. He turned around and limped away. His back, which was originally considered tall and slender, now had a hint of loneliness. Did you just say that I taught you? Chu Luiyue narrowed her black eyes and asked when she saw Rong Xiao walking over. She had just recovered to level 6 mystic cultivation, and had yet to cross the threshold of level 7. The strength he displayed just now wasn't something she could teach. I actually didn't know that I had such an outstanding disciple. Also, this disciple is like me and has contracted a divine beast. As Chu Luiyue spoke, she turned her gaze and glanced at Xue Xue, who had followed Rong Xiao over, and was about to pounce over happily. Xue Xue's movements froze. For a moment, it didn't know whether to go forward or retreat. Under Chu Luiyue's scrutinizing gaze, Xue Xue felt guilty. It shook its head and looked around. Actually, it didn't want to hide it. If it wasn't for Master's request, it wouldn't lie to her. Rong Xiao suddenly smiled. We've played chess together so many times. Even if I don't want to learn, I know a little. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Only then did he understand what Rong Xiao meant. From a certain point of view, a chess game and a profound formation shared an extremely high degree of similarity. Moreover, it tested one's agility and flexibility to an extreme degree. Usually, when she played chess, she would mix it with the Xian formation sometimes. Rong Xiao's words seemed to make sense. However, the doubts in Chu Luiyue's heart had not been completely eliminated. Even if Rong Xiao was just joking, the top-notch talent and strength that he displayed could not be mistaken. She actually didn't know that he was so powerful above mystic cultivators. There seemed to be countless mysteries hidden in his body. He was mysterious and unfathomable. However, when those eyes were looking at her, they were so sincere and clean. They were open and honest, without any concealment. She could feel his heart and inexplicably felt that no matter what, he would always stand by her side and shelter her from the wind and rain. In fact, she didn't trust people so easily. However, when facing Rongxiao, trust and dependence seemed to have become instinctive. Everything became natural. Chu Liyue pondered for a moment and looked at Sheng Guanyu. "Father, I want to talk to Rongxiao alone." How could Sheng Guanyu not see that Chu Liyue had something to ask Rongxiao? He immediately agreed. "Anyway, I've already seen him. Yuer has a good eye. If there's anything, you can discuss it yourselves." After saying that, he patted Rongxiao's shoulder meaningfully and left. Elder Chen Ke wanted to go forward and ask a few questions. Seeing that Sheng Guanyu had left, he swallowed the rest of his words and left with the other elders. However, after walking for a long distance, Elder Chen Ke still looked dignified. That Rongxiao doesn't seem to be as simple as he looks on the surface. When most of the people around had left, Chu Liyue said, "Let's go back to Zhaoyu Hall." Rongxiao stepped forward and held her hand with a doting smile on his lips. "Okay." Chu Liyue glared at him. "What are you doing?" Rongxiao turned his face, leaned closer, and chuckled. "Exercising my fiancé's rights." The news that Chu Liyue had a fiancé from Prince Yao Chen's seventh prince spread rapidly in the palace, as if it had grown wings. At the same time, Zhao Ziqing challenged Chu Liyue to a battle in order to marry her. In the end, he lost miserably, which immediately became the topic of everyone's conversation. When most people heard the first news, they were just shocked and surprised. But thinking about it carefully, this was actually quite normal. After all, Chu Liyue seemed to be a girl from a fallen family in country Yaochen. Marrying a prince was actually a social climb. However, the second news was too strange. Who was Zhao Ziqing? The second son of the Zhao family. The most outstanding genius of the Zhao family's younger generation. Even though he wasn't in Xiling these few years, most people still remembered how amazing he was back then. They heard that he had already broken through the bottleneck and become a level 8 mystic master. That Rongxiao actually defeated him. It was simply unbelievable. Didn't this prove that he was even more outstanding than Zhao Ziqing? A prince from a small affiliated country? These things quickly caused a huge uproar in Xiling, and Rongxiao's name quickly became the focus of everyone's discussion. No matter how turbulent the undercurrents were outside, Zhaoyu Hall was silent at this moment. Chu Liyue dismissed her attendants, leaving only her and Rongxiao in the room. Oh, and Shuai. Ever since she came in, Shuai had consciously found a corner to lie down, looking as if she had been wronged and admitted her mistake. Looking at its drooping brows, those who didn't know would think that it had just suffered a huge blow. Who would be able to compare this listless white lion with the divine beast that tore an 8th level Xian formation apart with a single claw? However, Chu Liyue was rather satisfied with Shuai's proactive attitude of admitting its mistakes. Compared to its master, it was simply too obedient. Chu Liyue looked at Rongxiao and narrowed her eyes dangerously. "Rongxiao, don't you have anything to say to me?" Rongxiao's long eyelashes fluttered and he smiled. What do you want to hear?" Asking the obvious. Chu Liyue's gaze scanned him from head to toe. "Then, let's start with your strength. You should be a level 9 mystic master now, right?" Rongxiao's lips moved slightly. He wanted to say no, but he swallowed the words back. He nodded. Hearing him admit it himself, Chu Liyue, who had already expected this, still felt her brows twitch fiercely. Even back then, she couldn't cross the threshold of level 9 mystic master. She didn't expect Rongxiao to be one long ago. Why didn't you say so before? Chu Liyue's tone carried a hint of warning. Rongxiao blinked innocently. You didn't ask, Chu Liyue. She couldn't refute this. Then let me ask you now. Other than being a level 9 mystic master, are you also a celestial physician? Chu Liyue took a deep breath and asked. Rongxiao slowly leaned back in his chair and tapped the table rhythmically with one hand. After a moment he looked up. There seemed to be a dense light in his eyes, and his voice was low and languid. What do you think? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 921. Chu Liuyue's eyebrows twitched. The meaning of Rong Xiu's words was self-explanatory. She narrowed her eyes. Then your celestial physician rank. Rong Xiu pondered for a moment and smiled faintly. I know a little. Chu Liuyue's mouth twitched. She would be a fool to believe him. Since when are the disciples of Mingyue Tianshan so powerful? Chu Liyue had never been to Mingyue Tianshan personally, but she knew a little about it. Mingyue Tianshan was a sect that was independent of the various empires, and had a rather aloof feeling. Compared to empires of Yao Chen's level, it was a little stronger. This was also the reason why Rong Xiu was sent to Mingyue Tianshan when he was born in poor health. There were powerhouses that the Yao Chen Empire could not match. However, although Mingyue Tianshan was powerful, it was still outside heaven's canopy, and could not be compared to the Tianling dynasty. Then how did they nurture a powerhouse like Rong Xiu? Rong Xiu seemed to have seen through her doubts, so he leaned back and looked at her with interest. You were born in Yao Chen. Aren't you already a powerhouse that ordinary people can't reach? Chu Liyue was speechless for a moment. After her rebirth, she did not have the Tianjin Yuan meridian from her previous life. It was almost as if she had to start from scratch. She had indeed suffered a lot on the way back from Yao Chen to Xiling. At the same time, she had encountered enough luck to be where she was today. If she could do it, why couldn't others? Moreover, from the beginning, she had already determined that Rong Xiu was extremely dangerous. At that time, she had already expected that he was extraordinary. But now, she clearly realized that she was much stronger than he had imagined. Chu Liyue was silent for a while before she said, Rong Xiu, you still haven't told me where your identity as the Son of God came from. As soon as he finished speaking, the room fell into silence. Rong Xiu looked into her eyes. There seemed to be waves of light swirling in his phoenix eyes, like a whirlpool that could completely devour people. After a while, Rong Xiu suddenly said, Do you still remember my mother? Chu Liyue was a little surprised by his sudden question, but he still nodded. Who didn't know Consort Wan, who was the queen of the empire of Yao Chen's harem back then? Rong Xiu smiled, but there was no smile in his eyes. His voice was extremely light. The so-called Holy Son is my identity in my mother's family. Chu Liyue had thought of many answers before, but none of them were close to this. His mother's family? Didn't they say that Consort Wan came from an ordinary family? How come now? Chu Liyue suddenly recalled the day when the third prince led his troops to rebel. Rong Xiu and Emperor Jiawen seemed to have a decisive battle. At that time, when Emperor Jiawen wanted to break through and enter heaven's canopy, Rong Xiu once said something. He seemed to have said that his mother's wish in life was to not let Emperor Jiawen step into heaven's canopy. Yes, now that he thought about it, the cause and effect of everything could be explained. Chu Liyue widened her eyes slightly. Why your mother is from heaven's canopy? Rong Xiu nodded. Chu Liyue was dazed for quite a while. I see. She had suspected it before. But as too many things happened later on, she had thrown this matter to the back of her mind. This means that Rong Xiu is actually from heaven's canopy. His mother's status is clearly much higher than Emperor Jiawen's. Then, back then, my mother went out of heaven's canopy to train. When she met with danger in a territory, she met father by accident, and the two of them got together. But when they got married, my mother didn't know father's identity. Rong Xiu lightly said. Chu Liyue pressed her lips against each other. Even though Rong Xiu said it very simply, she could roughly guess the ins and outs of the matter. A woman from heaven's canopy, who married Emperor Jiawen, was marrying a lower status. Besides, from various situations, Rong Xiu's mother's clan didn't seem to be an ordinary family. Consort Wan was young and naive. When she met Emperor Jiawen, she thought that she was destined to be with him, so she didn't hesitate to be with him. In the end, she didn't expect that she would marry an emperor with a harem of 3,000. No one would be willing to accept and forgive such deceit. It was no wonder that there were rumors that after Consort 1 entered the palace, she was still depressed even though Emperor Jiawen doted on her a lot. She only stayed in the palace for a year or two before moving out. She also didn't go back until she died. As for her background, it should be made up by Emperor Jiawen. After I was born, Mother sent me to Mingyue Tianshan. A few years later, the clan's people came and wanted to bring Mother and me back. It was a pity that Mother had already passed away. Rongxiu's tone was calm, and his expression was quiet, as if he were talking about someone else's matters. Back then, Mother secretly married an outsider, and it went against the clan's rules. After she found out about Father's identity, she became a concubine and was too ashamed to return home. Thus, she kept hiding from the clan's people until she passed away. Actually, back then, she sent Rongxiu to Mingyue Tianshan because she didn't want his identity to be exposed. She thought that she could be at ease if she handed Rongxiu over there. However, many things that she didn't expect happened after that. Of course, she wouldn't know about all of this. Chu Luiyue looked at him with a normal expression, as if she had already seen through all of this. But her heart still ached slightly. So, all these years, you haven't been staying at Mingyue Tianshan? She asked softly. Rongxiu responded. I would come back occasionally, but I wouldn't stay for long. I didn't find a suitable time to tell you about this. Are you still angry? Chu Luiyue sighed in her heart and shook her head. It was naturally very difficult for him to return to the clan with such a background. Rongxiu had a grudge against Emperor Jiawen, and they had completely fallen out back then. Hence, he definitely wouldn't be willing to go back to Emperor Yaochen. This was probably one of the reasons why he decided to give Emperor Yaochen's throne to the third prince after planning everything. As for his mother's family, it was obvious that his identity was a little awkward. Rongxiu, it must have been tough on you all these years, right? From what Rongxiu said previously, it wasn't hard to guess how strict Consort Wan's family was. And Rongxiu, to them, they might not be willing to accept him. Rongxiu thought for a while. It's all right. Even if he obtained the position of Prince of Grace, many people were eyeing him covetously, and many wanted to rebel. Hence, it was a little troublesome to deal with them. Rongxiu nodded and saw her heart-aching eyes. He smiled slightly, held her hand tightly, and pulled her into his embrace. Her gentle and sweet aura instantly filled his arms. He hugged her slender waist and buried his head in her shoulder, smelling the faint fragrance of her cloud-like hair. A certain empty place in his heart seemed to have been filled. I'm fine. He spoke softly as if he was murmuring and pouring out his heart. I have you. With you it's enough. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Chapter 922. Chu Luiyue's heart softened, and she lowered her head and gently kissed him on the lips. It was slightly cool and soft. Rongxiu, I'll be your family in the future, okay? She retreated half an inch, stared into his eyes, and said seriously. Even though Rongxiu didn't say it, she could feel the lonely aura on him, as if it came from his bones. His hands were cold, and so were his lips, but she thought his heart was warm. If he was alone in this world, she was willing to stay by his side. With true love as close as family, she didn't want to ask anything else. She only knew that he was him. Everything else had nothing to do with them. Whether he was the seventh prince of Yaochen or the holy son of a certain family, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were each other's. Rongxiu looked at her. Suddenly, he hugged her tightly with one hand, held her face with the other, and kissed her. His hand was very strong, as if he wanted to crush her into his bones and blood. However, his other hand was unbelievably careful, as if he was holding a rare treasure, and was afraid of bumping into it. Amidst the endless madness, there was also a strong restraint that was filled with love. The vague words scattered between his lips and teeth. Okay. Rongxiu's victory over Zhao Zicheng had a far greater impact than expected. Because other than Zhao Zicheng, there were many young talents in Shilling City who had some thoughts about Chu Luiyue. Whether it was identity, appearance, or talent, the current Chu Luiyue was absolutely top-notch. When she was still the princess, countless people admired her. Now that she had killed Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Guanwan, ascended to the throne, and returned in glory, countless people naturally bowed to her. However, Rong Xiu's appearance instantly disrupted these people's thoughts. Zhao Zicheng was the first to be beaten up. The rest of the people naturally calmed down and had to think carefully. Even a level 8 mystic master was defeated by Rong Xiu. One could imagine how strong he was. It was impossible to say that he wasn't afraid. But at the same time, there were also many people who were skeptical. Zhao Zicheng was a famous genius in the Western tomb, and could be said to be one of the best among the younger generation. How could he lose to a mere prince from Yaochun? However, the news did indeed come from the palace. It was said that there were many people who saw it with their own eyes. For a time, there were different opinions, which made many people curious about Rong Xiu. Countless people wanted to see for themselves what kind of person this Rong Xiu was. Chu Luyue had originally planned to wait until the matters in the Tianling dynasty were settled before confessing everything to Rong Xiu and putting the wedding on the agenda. However, he did not expect that Chu Ning would be taken away. After this incident, the wedding could not be carried out for the time being. Even though the other party didn't seem to want to hurt Chu Ning on the note, Chu Luyue was still very worried. From the beginning until now, the other party knew her identity like the back of his hand. It was obvious that he was targeting her. However, she knew nothing about the other party. After thinking about it, she asked Rong Xiu again. This time, Rong Xiu didn't hesitate and nodded directly. He knew where the note came from. But when Chu Luyue wanted to continue asking, Rong Xiu didn't continue to answer, and only said that it was not suitable for her to know these things now. Chu Luyue was a little confused by this answer. Then, when will I find out? Rong Xiu paused. The current Chu Luyue was only a rank 6 warrior. Even if she knew these things, there was nothing she could do, and it would only increase her worries. If you break through to rank 7 in a month, I will tell you. Chu Luyue frowned slightly. Breaking through to rank 7 wasn't difficult for her. The difficult part was achieving her goal in this short month. One had to know that she had just returned from the Red Moon Desert and had just reached the middle of rank 6. This speed was already very fast. If she broke through to rank 7, it would be terrifying. As if seeing her concerns, Rong Xiu smiled. If you trusts me, I will be your sparring partner for this month. How about it? Chu Luyue looked at his confident and calm smile, and her heart suddenly ignited with fighting spirit. It's a deal. There was also a martial arts field in the backyard of Zhaoyu Hall. It was even bigger and of higher quality than the one in Yuanhe Hall. This was because this was the place where Chu Luyue used to cultivate. Other than the ground being paved with incomparably hard green stones, there was a level 9 Xian formation on the entire martial arts training ground as a protection. It could ensure that any fluctuations produced in the martial arts training ground would not casually spread to the outside and would not harm others. Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu stood face to face. As the order had already been given, there were no palace servants around to serve them. There were only the two of them in the huge martial arts field. Chu Luyue looked at Rong Xiu opposite her, thinking that the two of them had known each other for so long, but had never really fought. She couldn't help but be eager to try. She had long known that Rong Xiu was very strong. It wasn't easy to wait until now, and she was able to recover a part of her strength. Perhaps she could compete with him? With that thought, Chu Luyue's eyes lit up. Rong Xiu looked at her excited face and raised his eyebrows slightly. This familiar scene was really nostalgic. Rong Xiu, you don't have to go easy on me later. Just attack. Chu Luyue was sure that she wouldn't be a match for Rong Xiu in terms of Xian master. But for martial artists that might not be the case. After all, although she looked like she was only at the middle of rank 6, her combat power had already reached the level of a rank 7 martial artist. The bitter training she had gone through in the Red Moon Desert wasn't for nothing. Rong Xiu smiled and responded. Okay. Xue Xue, who was lying in the field, looked at her master with disdain. You don't even have a draft when you lie pooey. Rong Xiu sensed Xue Xue's gaze and glanced at it coldly. Let's not talk about the past. Now that you hadn't fully recovered, if he really attacked without holding back and hurt his wife, he would be the one feeling heartache. What else could he do if he could only pamper the wife he pursued? At this moment, Chu Liyue moved and went straight for Rong Xiao. She was extremely fast. In the Red Moon Desert, Chu Liyue's most obvious improvement was her close combat power after fighting with those puppets. Therefore, her speed had increased by a lot. In addition, now that she had recovered her identity, she didn't need to hide the mini cultivation techniques that she had cultivated in the past. Naturally, it was more convenient. In the blink of an eye, the slender and tall figure had already rushed in front of Rong Xiao. She clenched her fist and threw a punch. Before she could see how Rong Xiao moved, his figure had already disappeared in front of her. Chu Liyue missed her attack, so she turned around without thinking and gave a side kick. Bang! Rong Xiao easily clamped down on her ankle with one hand. Chu Liyue was shocked and took advantage of the situation to flip in the air. Rong Xiao quickly released his hand and avoided her attack. Tisk Yuer, are you trying to murder your husband? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 923. Chu Liyue landed lightly on the ground like a swallow. She looked at Rong Xiao and snorted when she heard his teasing. You can easily block my attack without using your full strength. Isn't it inappropriate for you to say that? Rong Xiao didn't even make a move just now. He just defended himself. But even so, she was still able to sense that his cultivation level was definitely far above hers. As you are a sparring partner, you have to have some strength. Otherwise, what if you get beaten down? Rong Xiao raised his hand with his palm facing up. He bent his fingers slightly and said with a smile, Are you coming? Chu Liyue gritted her teeth. The force in her body surged crazily, and her aura rose to its peak. A star gradually flickered on the tip of her finger. Come, Jingshan finger. It was impossible to pose any threat to Rong Xiao with a small fight. She could only go all out now. A satisfied smile flashed across Rong Xiao's eyes. If she wanted to improve her strength quickly and steadily, she had to constantly challenge her limits. Coincidentally, he knew where her limits were the best. Therefore, he was the most suitable person to be this person. In the next moment, a cluster of golden flames appeared in Rong Xiao's palm. After Elder Chen Ku returned, he pondered for a long time, and finally went to see Sheng Guanyu. When he arrived at Yuanhe Hall, Sheng Guanyu was reading in his room. He raised his head when he heard the commotion. You're finally here. He didn't look surprised. Apparently, he had already expected this. Please take a seat. Elder Chen Ku was an elder of 3 dynasties. His status was extraordinary. Even Sheng Guanyu had to be polite to him. Seeing Sheng Guanyu's reaction, Elder Chen Ku knew that they were thinking about the same thing. Therefore, he didn't stand on ceremony and sat down. It seems that His Majesty also feels that something is wrong. Elder Chen Ku frowned and went straight to the point. That Rong Xiao's identity, I'm afraid it's not that simple. Based on the strength that he had displayed previously, how could a prince of country Yao Chen possess such strength? Even if he was talented, without sufficient resources and opportunities, it was impossible for him to reach his current level. I've seen his father before. Sheng Guanyu put down the book in his hand, and suddenly said such a sentence. Mediocre and mediocre. Even if such a person was fortunate enough to give birth to a talented child, it wouldn't be too exaggerated. Rong Xiao was obviously far surpassed this standard. You mean? Elder Chen Ku was bewildered. I have a feeling I've seen his aura before. Sheng Guanyu rubbed his temples. But I can't remember at the moment. However, he had a good impression of Rong Xiao the moment he saw him. Therefore, she didn't continue to ask him many questions, but let Yuer ask him. Elder Chen, what do you? Since he is here, he must have something. Elder Chen Ke hesitated for a while. Is Zhou's? Too. Sheng Guanyu paused and looked up with a sharp glint in his eyes. Elder Chen Ke, do you think so too? Level 9 mystic cultivators are extremely strong, just like level 9 warriors. They are only one step away from the next level. There are only a few of such cultivators in the entire Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu is so young, but he's already at this level. Other than that side, who else can nurture such a person? Shang Guanyu stroked his beard and seemed to agree. That's what I think too. Was born with the Tianjin Yuan meridian, and was a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. That's why she could reach a level that ordinary people can't reach in their lifetime. As for Rong Xiu, he couldn't see through. Taizu should know more about this matter, right? Elder Chen Ke looked a little serious. But it seems that Taizu didn't talk to her about this. Taizu must have his own considerations. Maybe he has already told Yu. Shang Guanyu pondered for a moment. Now that Yu has ascended to the throne, many things have settled down. I'll find a time to talk to her in detail. Elder Chen Ke nodded and then murmured curiously. If Rong Xiu is really someone from that side, why did he appear as Prince Yao Chun? His Majesty was killed back then, and he was reborn over there. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? There was one more thing that Elder Chen Ke didn't say. If Rong Xiu's real identity is really as we think, then it's really hard to say who's going to marry who in this marriage. Shang Guanyu fell into deep thought and waved his hand. Forget it. As long as Yu recognizes him, and he recognizes Yu, it's fine. As for the rest, there's no need to care so much. By the way, I asked you to investigate Jiang Yuqing before. What did you find out? Elder Chen Ke calmed down and sat up straight. His expression was much more serious. You don't say. I really found something wrong. Jiang Yuqing seems to have been secretly contacting someone in the past few years. Moreover, it seems that he has been following the other party's orders, and has been working for the other party. It's just that he has been very secretive, so we can't find out who the other party is. Shang Guanyu snorted coldly. So there's really a master behind him? Yes. In addition, Elder Chen Ke hesitated for a moment and stopped talking. In addition? Shang Guanyu asked. In addition, Mu Qinghe seems to have something to do with this matter. Shang Guanyu frowned tightly. He's Jiang Yuqing's man. It's normal to have something to do with him. No. Elder Chen Ke shook his head. If Mu Qinghe is simply Jiang Yuqing's subordinate, it stands to reason that she is not qualified to contact the person behind this. But that's not the case. She seems to have contacted the person behind Jiang Yuqing's back. Digression. The fifth update is a little late. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day, everyone. Don't forget to receive the monthly red packet. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 924. Really? This time, Shang Guanyu was really taken aback. After thinking for a moment, he slowly said, in this case, Mu Qinghe may not be completely Jiang Yuqing's man. But what was his purpose for doing this? When you are asked if Mu Qinghe had betrayed her, Mu Qinghe admitted it without hesitation. From the beginning to the end, he didn't defend himself. Mu Qinghe was personally trained and promoted by Yu. Compared to others, their relationship was naturally much deeper, and his actions made Yu feel a sense of betrayal, which was even more intense compared to other people. According to what Mu Qinghe said before, he was Jiang Yuqing's man from the beginning, but from the current situation, it seemed that there was something fishy. If there was an inside story, why did he have to do this? As if he couldn't wait to be sentenced to death. Is Mu Qinghe still imprisoned in the Mu Mansion? Yes. Shang Guanyu stood up, but after taking 2 steps he stopped again. Elder Chen Ke asked tentatively, Your Majesty, do you want to go to the Mu Mansion and ask in person? Shang Guanyu put one hand behind his back and shook his head. Forget it. If he doesn't want to say, no one can get anything out of him. I'll tell you this news when I have the chance in the future. I'll make a decision later. Elder Chen Ke nodded and asked again, then Rong Xiu. Let's wait and see first. Yes. Mu Mansion. The courtyard was cold and cheerless. Other than a few armored black guards patrolling the area, there was no one else around. Jin Fengqi stood at the door. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but sigh with mixed feelings. Sigh. In the past, although Mu Mansion was only guarded by the Black Cavalry, the atmosphere at that time was very different from now. In the past, it was still a bit lively, But now, it was no different from a prison. He had always stayed away from this kind of place. But now he had to come. Jian Fengqi, you're here again? A figure flashed and Shi appeared. After removing Lei Laoxi's mask, the current Mitsui looked much more refined than before, and he was also thinner than before. However, he still looked very strong and sturdy. In addition to his tyrannical strength, he was able to create an invisible pressure just by standing there. Jian Fengqi coughed. It's fine if you come once or twice, but you come every day. Mitsui looked at him suspiciously, smacked his lips, and finally couldn't help but ask the question that had been bothering him. What is he trying to do? Jian Fengqi accepted his fate and walked inside. Is he still doing nothing in his room today? Yeah. Shi shrugged. You can go by yourself. Ever since His Highness came, the three of them had a talk in the room. He didn't know what they said, but after that, their reactions were very strange. His Highness seemed to be in a daze, and after she left, Jian Fengqi scolded Mu Qinghe for an hour in exasperation. Mu Qinghe managed to catch her with difficulty, but her face turned pale and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Jian Fengqi was even more shocked. This is thump. Mu Qinghe fainted and suddenly collapsed to the ground. At Zhaoyu Palace. Time passed by minute. Unknowingly, it was already evening. The sun was setting in the west, reflecting a gorgeous glow on the thick clouds. The sparring between Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu had finally come to an end. Her clothes were drenched in sweat, and her strength was almost completely exhausted. On the other hand, other than Rong Xiu's slightly messy clothes, there was nothing unusual about him. It was as if he had just taken a leisurely stroll instead of sparring with Chu Luiyue for so long. Chu Luiyue panted heavily, looking at Rong Xiu, and couldn't help but grind her teeth. This man had always suppressed his strength to a level higher than hers. How infuriating. You actually hid so much of your strength. She was about to walk forward, but her body went limp and she fell forward directly. Rong Xiu went forward and pulled her into his arms, then carried her horizontally with a smile on his lips. Not at all. I'm just a little stronger than you are this time. You'll definitely win next time. Chu Luiyue pinched his face and snorted heavily. I'll definitely surpass you next time on the Qingyun roll. Digression. Happy Chinese Valentine's Day again, mobile users. Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 925. Rong Xiu's movements suddenly paused. His brows twitched imperceptibly as he looked at Chu Luiyue in his arms and slowly asked, "What did you just say?" Chu Luiyue was also stunned. The azure cloud roll. What was that? Why would she suddenly say such a thing? It was as if she had said the same thing before. I don't know either. Chu Luiyue murmured, and immediately frowned as she kept recalling and searching in her mind. But she couldn't remember anything. Rong Xiu stared at her face and saw a faint layer of doubt in her eyes. His hanging heart relaxed a little. He calmly turned his gaze away and lowered his eyelids to hide the emotions in his eyes. I'll send you back first. Chu Luiyue nodded absent-mindedly as she wrapped her arms around Rong Xiu's neck and leaned on his shoulder as she thought about what had just happened. The azure cloud roll. She said that she must win against Rong Xiu on the azure cloud roll next time? Rong Xiu. She suddenly spoke and glanced at Rong Xiu. Have you heard of the azure cloud roll? The man shook his head as the afterglow shone on his smooth and perfect side profile. It was still breathtaking, but he didn't say anything. Chu Luiyue had some doubts in her heart. Rong Xiu's meaning was that he didn't know. But why would she say such a thing to Rong Xiu just now? Perhaps this was related to the memory she had lost? Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought and planned to find a chance to think about it when she returned. Rong Xiu carried her and walked back. Fortunately, after Chu Luiyue returned, she had cleaned up the people in the palace. There were almost no palace servants left in Zhaoyu Hall. In addition, this martial arts field was a relatively private place in Zhaoyu Hall. From here, she could directly return to her sleeping quarters. Rong Xiu didn't meet anyone along the way, so he directly carried her to her bedroom. You are. Just as he shouted, he suddenly realized that the person in his arms was quiet. He looked down and saw that the woman in his arms was leaning on his shoulder with her eyes closed. Her breathing was even, and she seemed to have fallen asleep. Rongxiu couldn't help but laugh, but he also felt a little heartache. It was probably because the previous training was too tiring. However, the fact that she could fall asleep so quickly in his arms proved that she was at ease. This made Rongxiu feel a lot more relieved. He carefully placed her on the bed, wiped her sweat, and covered her with a thin blanket. Looking at her peaceful sleeping face, Rongxiu's eyes gradually overflowed with gentleness. When she was like this in the past, although she was often exhausted, it was very rare for her to fall asleep directly. Returning to the West Hill for revenge this time must have consumed a lot of her energy and mental energy. It was a good thing that she could have a good rest now. Rongxiu held her wrist. A pure and gentle energy slowly flowed into her body. In her sleep, she seemed to be dreaming of something and whispered something. Rongxiu listened and vaguely heard that it was related to the green cloud roll. He frowned slightly. Now that she had not broken through to the 7th level, it was reasonable to say that that thing was still sealed in her body, and she should not be thinking of this. But it seemed that it was much faster than he had expected. With the nourishment of Rongxiu's power, Chu Liyue's brows gradually relaxed, and she finally fell asleep peacefully. Rongxiu stood in his original spot quietly for a while, and looked at Tuanzi, who had appeared at the side without him knowing. Take good care of her. Tuanzi nodded sensibly, which was rare for her. Rongxiu then turned and left. Xuexue followed closely behind. Walking out of Zhaoyu Hall, Rongxiu looked into the distance, and in a certain direction. If he remembered correctly, Huayang Hall should be over there. It was also the place where Shengguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing were imprisoned. Rongxiu thought for a while, and turned around to leave the palace. Chu Liyue had a long and messy dream. In the dream, she seemed to be competing with someone in order to win first place on the green cloud roll. The other party's face and figure were very blurry, but his strength was extremely strong. She lost again and again, and lost again and again. Sometimes it was very quiet, sometimes it was very noisy, as if many people were watching and cheering. She wanted to see the other party's face clearly, but she could not. After some time, even she could not remember how many times she had competed. She finally won the competition again. She was very happy, and the person opposite her seemed to be very happy too. Someone was shouting something around them. She vaguely heard that it seemed to be you. The person opposite her suddenly took a step forward. It was as if he had suddenly broken through a layer of fog. His figure gradually became clear. It was a young man wearing a black brocade robe, with a green jade belt around his waist, easily outlining the man's tall figure with wide shoulders and narrow waist. He seemed to have said something to her. The surroundings were quiet for a moment, and then there was a burst of enthusiastic cheers and screams, as if it was boiling. As for his face, it was gradually revealed. Whoosh! Chu Liyue suddenly opened her eyes. Her body was covered in cold sweat, and her heart was beating so fast that her ears were numb. She calmed down for a while before she realized that she was dreaming. Dumpling flew over and rubbed against her face intimately. Chu Liyue hugged Dumpling in her arms, and the waves in her heart gradually calmed down. After waking up, everything in the dream began to quickly forget. That man's figure seemed very familiar, but that face, in the end, she did not see it clearly. An absurd thought was born in her heart. She vaguely felt that the man in the dream, who was competing with her, seemed to be the one on the octagonal pavilion on the cliff, and he was extremely similar to the first master. Night fell. The 100 Herbs building was already closed, and Yuling was checking things on the 3rd floor. Suddenly he heard something. When he turned around, he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out. Master! He hurriedly bowed. Master, why are you now? Rongxiu waved his hand. I'm just here to take something. Yuling heaved a sigh of relief. God knows how he felt when he turned around and saw his master standing there. Yes, Yuling hurriedly responded. Seeing Rongxiu walk inside, he was still very surprised. Now his master's name was well known in West Hill. Everyone knew that the new emperor had a fiancée. Although he was born in Yaochun, he defeated Zhao Zicheng. Did you pick it for madam? Yuling followed him and asked carefully. In fact, when he learned that Chu Luyue was actually from Shangguanyu, he was also very shocked. He was wondering why his master returned to Yaochun back then. So that was the reason. Rongxiu nodded and walked to an inconspicuous shelf. On it was a fist-sized inconspicuous pine stone jade box. Perhaps it was because it had not been touched for a long time, but it was covered with a faint layer of dust. Rongxiu did not seem to care and raised his hand to take it. Yuling was slightly surprised. So this was what his master wanted. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 926. Yuling wanted to ask something, but he didn't. Rongxiu had just put away the green pine stone jade box when there was a knock on the door. Master, I have something to report. It was Yumo's voice. Yuling looked at Rongxiu. Rongxiu said lightly, just come in. Yuling then understood that it was his master who called Yumo over. Yumo pushed the door open and entered. When he saw Yuling, he nodded gently and then bowed to Rongxiu. Master, you guessed right. Jiang Yuqing has contacted that person again. Yuling was shocked when he heard this and immediately said, Master, I'll go and guard outside. Rongxiu nodded, and Yuling hurriedly left. When he left, he even carefully closed the door. Walking out of the door, Yuling's expression was slightly serious. It seemed that his master was going to make a move. Yumo had been staying in West Hill during this period, secretly investigating Jiang Yuqing's matter. After the matter was exposed some time ago, the entire Jiang family was executed, and Jiang Yuqing was also imprisoned. Yumo waited for a long time before he finally found this clue. The time should be yesterday. A look of disdain flashed across Yumo's eyes. He chose this time because everyone in the Jiang family is dead, and everyone has lowered their guard against him. This Jiang Yuqing is really selfish. In order to survive, he is willing to let the entire family die with him. Rongxiu smiled faintly. He has always only cared about himself, so it's not surprising that he would do such a thing. Jiang Yuqing thought that he had climbed up the social ladder, but he was just too smart. Have you found out the identity of that person? Yumo paused and shook his head. I only found out that the other party is Jiang Yuqing's backer, but I didn't find out his identity. Rongxiu didn't seem to care. If it's so easy for you to find out, then I'm too incompetent. Jiang Yuqing is now trapped in Huayang Palace. How did the news get out? Yumo's expression became serious. There's a special way to send messages in Huayang Palace. Mu Manor. The next day, the morning sun shone in through the window. Mu Qinghe's eyes moved, and he finally opened them. His vision was blurry at first, and then he subconsciously closed his eyes. You're awake? A cold voice came from the side. Mu Qinghe turned to look and saw a familiar face. Jian Fengqi crossed his arms as he sneered at him. There were 2 dark circles under his eyes, and he looked a little haggard, as if he hadn't rested well. S to me to saves to ts. From now on ts. Understand? To him to his t. S twos t tis d his is twos her. S's. SSTS. He knew his own body. Jian Fengqi didn't need to. Hearing this, Jian Fengqi was instantly infuriated, and he couldn't wait to go forward and beat him up. You. Thinking that he was the one who saved Mu Qinghe, he suppressed his anger and pointed at Mu Qinghe angrily. You're really something. I must have had nothing better to do to help you. Mu Qinghe leaned against the bed and closed her eyes, seemingly unmoved. You're not the only one I owe my life to. Chu Liuyue's was already too much for him to pay off. Jian Fengqi suppressed his anger and didn't want to continue arguing with him. He stepped forward, pulled a chair, and sat opposite Mu Qinghe. Speak. What's wrong with your body? Mu Qinghe said indifferently. 'Tis just an old injury. Jian Fengqi sneered. Do you really think I'm a celestial physician for nothing? The poison in your body is quite old, isn't it? It's extremely cold, and has already penetrated deep into your organs. Even if you can't clear it, you'll be dead by now. This kind of poison doesn't exist in the West Hill, nor in the entire Tianling. Don't tell me you don't know. Mu Qinghe didn't say anything, as if she couldn't be bothered to explain. The two fell into a silent confrontation. After a while, Jian Fengqi stood up. Don't worry. I can't do anything about your poison, but that doesn't mean others can't. I'll go to the palace and ask someone. He turned around and left. Just as he was about to step out of the door, he heard a voice behind him. Wait! Chongshu Pavilion. Yi Ranran arrived at the herb garden early in the morning, ready to take care of the herbs. But when she arrived, she saw that someone was already there. She took a closer look and exclaimed in surprise, You're a genius! Pavilion Master. Yu Qisong cut off the withered leaves of the Longting Ganoderma in her hand and straightened up. She smiled kindly at Yi Ranran. Yi Ranran walked over and asked curiously, Pavilion Master, why are you here personally? Yu Qisong smiled. I have nothing to do anyway, so I came to take a look. Yi Ranran squinted her eyes. You miss Lu Yu? Most of these herbs were taken care of by Lu Yu. It wasn't hard to understand why the Pavilion Master was here. Yu Qisong smiled and gently knocked on her head. You can call her that in our Chongshu Pavilion, but you can't call her that outside. She had regained her identity. Moreover, she was the emperor and the supreme existence of the Tianling dynasty. Naturally, she couldn't be treated as casually as before. Yi Ranran stuck out her tongue. Ranran knows. It took her a long time to accept this matter. Pavilion Master, if you miss her, why don't you just go to the palace? After all, the Pavilion Master was Lu Yu's master, wasn't she? Yu Qisong sighed and shook her head. She must be very busy this time. Besides, Pavilion Master. Lu Jiao suddenly ran over quickly. Pavilion Master. Qide said he remembered what happened in Nanjiang. Yu Qisong's eyes lit up. Let's go. Shilling City seemed to gradually calm down. The Jiang family and the Xiahou family, who had once been arrogant and insufferably arrogant, were completely destroyed overnight. In addition, many clans and people were also implicated and robbed in this turmoil. Days passed, and these shocking events seemed to gradually subside. People were very forgetful. Not long after, Shilling City had already regained its usual liveliness. It was as if those things had never happened, and the strong smell of blood after the beheading finally dissipated completely. Ordinary people continued their lives as usual. It was as if they had long forgotten about Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing who were imprisoned. However, in a place where everyone couldn't see, there was a surging undercurrent. A month passed in the blink of an eye. It was almost the 1-month period agreed on the note. In Zhaoyu Palace, Chu Luo was cultivating. She sat cross-legged with her hands on her knees. Vigorous force surged wildly. The force of heaven and earth and the surroundings began to pour into her body. She was preparing to break through. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 927. In this 1 month, she sparred with Rong Xiu almost every day, and her battle prowess increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, every time her battle prowess increased, Rong Xiu's battle prowess would increase as well, and he would always be able to suppress her. He seemed to be very clear about what level he should maintain his battle prowess at, so that he could stimulate her potential to the greatest extent without causing her any harm. But actually, this was the most terrifying part. This was enough to prove that Rong Xiu's control of force had reached an unimaginable level. Chu Luyue did not believe it at first, but later on, she realized in despair that Rong Xiu, she really could not detect his true strength. Every time she thought that she had found his weakness and could defeat him, she realized that he still had plenty of room to maneuver. Thus, slowly, Chu Luyue also realized that it would take a long time before she could completely defeat him. But this did not affect her. Instead, it made her even more determined to fight. And gradually, she also realized that this kind of exchange of pointers was actually more effective than the bitter training in the Red Moon Desert. Compared to those puppets, Rong Xiu was much better in all aspects, and because he could use force, his battle prowess was stronger. Chu Luyue thought about it day and night, pondering on how to defeat him by a move or two. Under such circumstances, her battle prowess had unknowingly increased by leaps and bounds, and she had been improving rapidly. So after a month, She finally touched the threshold of a breakthrough. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, she had already broken through to the middle stage of the 6th level. If she broke through again now, she would be at the peak of the 6th level. Chu Luyue held her breath and waited, calming her heart and looking inside. In her dantian, on top of the water droplet, 6 veins floated quietly. The first 5 veins were extremely beautiful. Only the last one was slightly dim. The force that entered her body washed through the yuan meridians in her limbs and bones. And finally all gathered here. Like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, it continuously devoured the surging power. At the same time, the 5 treasures were connected, and the aura contained within was continuously increasing. Time passed quickly. At a certain moment, Chu Luyue finally felt that the time had come. He gathered all the force in his dantian together, and fiercely slammed it toward the water droplet. Boom! The 2 forces fiercely collided. Chu Luyue's body exploded with a roar. After that, the sound of something breaking resounded. Crack! It was as if an invisible barrier had been broken. In the next moment, Chu Luyue could clearly see that the 6th line seemed to have shed its gray layer, gradually revealing a gorgeous and intense color. Wang! A wave of fluctuation spread out from above. Chu Luyue suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes, which were originally as black and clean as black jade, now seemed to be burning with 2 balls of fire. One was as red as the blazing sun. One was as transparent as the cold moon. It was as if the 2 forces had perfectly fused together, erupting with an unparalleled aura. At this point, the peak of the 6th step, Shang Guanyu had just walked out of Zhaoyu Hall when he sensed a terrifying aura erupting from it. He quickened his pace and walked inside. That power seemed to be coming from Yuer's bedroom. In front of the tightly shut door stood a tall and straight figure. It was Rongxiu. At this time, he was raising his hand to set up a layer of bounded domain outside the bedroom, which easily blocked all the fluctuations inside. Like raindrops falling into the sea, it did not cause any waves. Shang Guanyu's pupils shrank. Although he was not as talented as Yuer, his strength was not bad. After recuperating during this period of time, he had returned to the peak of the 8th step. Otherwise, he would not have been able to ascend to the throne. But when he saw this scene, he suddenly realized that Rongxiu's strength was definitely above his. And this also made him more convinced of his previous guess. Hearing the noise, Rongxiu turned around. When he saw Shang Guanyu, he smiled slightly and bowed to him. Shang Guanyu looked at him with a complicated expression. Are you protecting Yuer? Rongxiu nodded. She has just broken through to the peak of the 6th step. Although he had expected this before, hearing Rongxiu's confirmation with his own ears, Shang Guanyu was still quite excited. Really, he looked at the closed door with eager and proud eyes. He remembered that when Yuer came back, she seemed to be only at the middle of the 6th step. He did not expect her to break through to the peak so quickly. During this period of time, thanks to your help, right? Shang Guanyu glanced at Rongxiu and asked. He knew that Rongxiu went to the palace at a fixed time every day to accompany Yuer to practice. Obviously, Rongxiu's contribution could not go unnoticed for you, to be able to break through so smoothly. Rongxiu's smile deepened. Her talent is outstanding. To her, this is not a difficult thing to do. His words and actions showed that he did not mean to take credit for himself. Shang Guanyu did not speak again. Breaking through from the middle of the 6th step to the peak seemed to be a small step. But in fact, there was a huge gap in the middle. Even cultivators with the Daijing Yuan Meridian could not smoothly break through without at least half a year. Yuer's speed was almost comparable to that of when she had the Tianjin Yuan Meridian. During this period of time, he had secretly inquired about Yuer's past. He learned that she was born a loser with a damaged Yuan Meridian, and reached this step in just a year. In comparison, her cultivation speed was even faster than that of the past. At this moment, with a creak, the door finally opened. Rongxiu waved his sleeve, and the ward disappeared in an instant. It turned into countless light spots, and quickly disappeared in midair. Shang Guanyu could not help but look at Rongxiu again, and became more curious about his identity and background. Just what kind of powerful force could nurture such a person? These thoughts flashed through his mind, and Chu Luiyue had already walked out. She was a little surprised to see Shang Guanyu. Father? Shang Guanyu looked at her with relief. I haven't congratulated you, for breaking through again. Chu Luiyue's eyes were bright, and she was in high spirits. She took a few steps forward. Thank you, Father. What brings you here today? Shang Guanyu nodded and took out an invitation from his bosom. The Baiming dynasty sent a letter. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. It's coming. Digression. Updated at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 928. She reached out and took the letter, seemingly unintentionally asking, We don't have much contact with the Baiming dynasty. Why would they write us a letter? Shang Guanyu shook his head. I haven't opened it yet. Chu Luiyue glanced at the invitation. There was a line of words on it. To the Emperor of the Tianling dynasty. Her eyebrows twitched. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one on the note. She suppressed her racing heart and opened the invitation. It was an invitation. Chu Luiyue quickly finished reading and knitted her brows slightly. Shang Guanyu asked worriedly, What's wrong? Did something happen? Chu Luiyue handed the invitation over. The Baiming dynasty has invited the other 4 dynasties to Lin State. Why are we going to Lin State? Lin State was the capital of the Baiming dynasty. Although the dynasties in Heaven's Canopy occasionally communicated with each other, they didn't have much contact with each other. It was extremely rare to invite so many people from dynasty to the same place all of a sudden. Shang Guanyu asked as he read through the invitation. Immediately, he exclaimed in shock. The ancient Phoenix Mountain is opening? That's right. The letter said that the ancient Phoenix Mountain would open in half a month. They thought that the Baiming dynasty alone wouldn't be able to handle it, so they invited several dynasties to go together. Chu Luiyue frowned. The ancient Phoenix Mountain was a mountain outside Lin State City. It was where the Taizu of the Baiming dynasty tried to break through to the God realm. Unlike Shang Guanjing, their great ancestor had indeed succeeded in doing so back then. Since then, the entire ancient Phoenix Mountain had become the divine mountain of the Baiming dynasty. Although it was also something that happened 1,000 years ago, it was because of this that the entire Dark North dynasty seemed to be superior to others for many years. The surrounding dynasties were more polite to the Baiming dynasty. The invitation was written by the crown prince of the Baiming dynasty. I heard that he's the only son of the Baiming dynasty's old emperor. He's very talented and has always been favored. Now half of the imperial power of the Baiming dynasty is in his hands. Shang Guanyu glanced at the letter and pondered for a moment. Regardless of whether it's for the ancient Phoenix Mountain or for the sake of the Dark North dynasty, the people from the other dynasties will probably go. Chu Luiyue nodded. That was what she thought too. Shang Guanyu pondered for a moment and asked doubtfully. However, the other 3 dynasties are all neighbors of the Baiming dynasty, and they have frequent interactions with each other. Only our Tianling dynasty is far away from them, and we have almost never had such interactions with them before. Why would they write such an invitation? Chu Luiyue's eyes darkened. It turned out that the people who kidnapped Chu Ning were from the Dark North dynasty. Moreover, if he guessed correctly, the mastermind behind all of this was the so-called Prince Baiming, Jun Jiuqing. In the end, he was here for her. However, she had never been to the Baiming dynasty and did not know this Jun Jiuqing. Why would he do this? Whether it's right or wrong, we'll know when we go. Chu Luiyue said firmly. Shang Guanyu hesitated for a moment. Why don't I go on your behalf this time? Chu Luiyue shook her head. It says that the emperors of the various dynasties are invited to bring their people. They must already know that their daughter has ascended to the throne. If you go on their behalf, I'm afraid they will criticize you. Shang Guanyu was actually a little worried. But it was precisely because this letter was so obviously targeted that he had some misgivings. For some reason, he felt that this invitation was not friendly. Chu Luiyue saw the worry between his eyebrows and smiled. She raised her hand and smoothed the wrinkles between his eyebrows. All right, Father, are you still worried about your daughter's work? Moreover, they said that the ancient Phoenix Mountain was going to open this time. and they invited the various dynasties to bring some of their top experts and outstanding talents. With so many people going together, it would be a grand occasion. Nothing would happen. Shang Guanyu did not know whether to laugh or cry at her actions. You are as smart. I'm not worried about anything you do. Since you've made up your mind, then pack up these few days and choose some people to go. Chu Luiyue nodded. When the ancient Phoenix Mountain opens, the rare treasures of heaven and earth will appear. I heard that there will be a force tide. It's an extremely rare cultivation opportunity for any cultivator. I don't want to miss it. Shang Guanyu looked at her serious expression, and his heart skipped a beat. All right. You are. Just do whatever you want to do. I'll always be behind you and support you. The Dark North Dynasty sent an invitation to Chu Luiyue to bring people to Lin Province to witness the opening of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Soon the news spread among the various sects and families. Everyone was excited and eager to go. The Dark North Dynasty was in existence that had produced a god-tier expert. And the ancient Phoenix Mountain was a precious place. Which cultivator in the world did not want to go and see it? In addition, people from several other dynasties would also go together, which made it even more grand. Even if it was just a look, it would be a precious life experience. To be able to meet so many top experts and outstanding geniuses, one could imagine how lucky it was. For a moment, the list of candidates became the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone wanted to know who Chu Luiyue would choose to go with her this time. In the study of Zhaoyu Palace, Chu Luiyue was sitting behind the table, flipping through the list that she had just written. The invitation said that she could bring a total of 10 people. 5 top experts, 5 outstanding geniuses. This number was actually not a small number. After all, other than the Tianling dynasty, people from the other 3 dynasties would also go. Needless to say, there would also be people from the Dark North dynasty. Since the quota was limited, the choice of the candidates became extremely important. Chu Luiyue first drafted a list for review. On one hand, the people going had to be strong enough. On the other hand, she had to leave enough people in West Hill in case someone started to cause trouble when she was not around. Moreover, there were so many spots in total. People from various sects and aristocratic families were also keeping a close eye on them. So she had to weigh the pros and cons. She stared at the list in her hand for a long while, then picked up her pen and made a few changes on it before settling on the final list. 10 days later, the Tianling dynasty was not close to the Dark North dynasty. Even if they used the teleportation portal, it would take a few days of travel time. Therefore, it was time for them to depart after briefing her on the matters in West Hill. She turned her gaze and looked at the invitation card next to her. Her expression turned serious. Jun Jiuqing. Could it be that they used to know each other? Thud. A sound suddenly came from behind her. She turned around and saw that Dumpling had accidentally knocked a few books off the bookshelf. She got up, walked over and picked up the books. When she picked up the last book, she was about to put it back in order when she realized that it was a little different. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she flipped open the book. Immediately, a look of shock flashed across her eyes. Her handwriting was on it. However, she had no recollection of writing these things. Digression. I'm a little stuck. The 5th update is around 6:30 p.m. Originally, I wanted to add more chapters today, but I had something to do at the last minute and had to go out. So I'll add more chapters tomorrow. Chapter 929. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and carefully flipped through the book in her hand from the first page. As she flipped through the pages, the shock and doubt in her heart increased instead of decreasing. The things written on it seemed to be chaotic and incoherent, but there was a vague pattern to it. It was like some kind of secret language. Dumpling seemed to have noticed that something was wrong. It squatted aside obediently, looking at the book for a while and looking at her for a while. Its eyes were rolling. Chu Luiyue stood there and spent quite some time before she finished reading the entire book. When she flipped to the last page, there was finally a signature that she could understand. Xian Yuan calendar. Year 3572. Return at the beginning of autumn. Chu Luyue stared at the line of words for a long time. Xian Yuan calendar. There was no such era name in the 1,000-year history of the Tianling dynasty. Moreover, as far as she knew, some of the surrounding dynasties did not have an era as long as 3,000 years. Then the time recorded in this sentence, whose era name did it follow? And which day did it represent? Return at the beginning of autumn. Could this be referring to leaving on the day of autumn? But this was her handwriting, so where did it go? Chu Luyue's eyes seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog, and she could not see clearly. She had a premonition that this book was most likely something like a diary. However, she couldn't remember when she had written these things down, nor did she know what the contents were. That sentence was written on the last page. Could it represent some kind of end? Chu Luyue was puzzled. She flipped through it repeatedly, but she had no clue. This was written by her, and she should be the one who put it here. However, she had no impression of it at all. Perhaps it has something to do with that memory, Chu Luyue muttered softly. At this moment, there was a fluctuation in her body. This fluctuation came from the top of the black pyramid. The seal on it was intact, and it seemed that something inside wanted to break out. Chu Luyue was shocked. This commotion seemed to be caused by the book in her hand. However, after a short while, the fluctuation stopped and returned to normal. Chu Luyue stood quietly and pondered for a long time. Taizu, she suddenly spoke. Little girl, what's the matter? Taizu's voice was clearly heard. Chu Luyue nodded. There's something I'd like to ask you. You said that the soul of the Shengguan clan was sealed in the Black Pyramid in my body. That's right. What happened? What I want to ask is, you should know who this soul belongs to, right? The Taizu suddenly fell silent. Chu Luyue felt as if his heart had been hammered by a heavy hammer. Her lips moved as she whispered, don't worry. Inside is my soul, isn't it? The study fell into a dead silence. After Chu Luyue finished speaking, Taizu did not reply for a long time. Night fell, and a bright moon hung high in the sky. It gently waved and sprinkled in through the window, outlining the slender and tall woman's long shadow. The moonlight shone on her porcelain-like face, making it half bright and half dark. Her eyelids were slightly lowered, and the expression in her eyes was dark and gloomy, like a bottomless lake, mysterious and unfathomable. The cool night breeze blew, and the corners of her clothes fluttered. After an unknown period of time, Taizu finally let out a long sigh. Actually, I'm not 100% sure, but I vaguely feel that it seems to be. Chu Luyue was his descendant, so he was naturally the most familiar with this. When they first met, he knew that the soul of the Shengguan clan was sealed in the Black Pyramid. Otherwise, it would not have been able to break through the attack of the Long Yuan sword and enter below. At first, he only thought that it was the soul of a descendant, and did not pay much attention to it. However, he gradually realized that it seemed to have something to do with Chu Luyue. However, because he did not have any evidence, he did not tell her. He did not expect her to bring it up this time. Did you discover something? Taizu asked. Chu Luyue nodded, then shook her head. I only caught a glimpse of the tip of the iceberg. If she had not flipped through the book and caused the Black Pyramid to move, she would not have thought of this. To think that she had been thinking that this might be an ancestor's. It's a pity that the seal on it is too strong, and I can't open it for the time being. Chu Luyue felt a little regretful, and she suddenly felt a little unwilling and puzzled. If this guess was true, then who was the one who specially stored it in this pyramid and hid it in the imperial tomb of Yaochen? Also, the first master had said that this thing was related to his wife and was only temporarily stored with her. What was going on? Since his wife was involved, it was impossible that he did not know what was inside, right? Chu Luyue suddenly felt an urge to see the first master again. She wanted to ask him personally what was going on in front of him. The person who left this seal is extremely powerful. Unless you break through to the 9th stage, you can only break it. Otherwise, Taizu actually had a headache. Chu Luyue was the descendant he doted on the most. If he could help her, he would definitely help her without holding back. Chu Luyue paused for a moment and put the book away. She would definitely solve all these mysteries. Knock knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Chu Luyue woke up from her thoughts and walked over to open the door. The person who came was Rong Xiao. At this time, it was already late at night. He was dressed in white and covered in cold moonlight. He looked at her, his eyes deep, as if they were sprinkling the sky with starlight. Chu Luyue blinked, then reacted and reached out to pull him. Rong Xiao, why are you here now? After receiving the invitation during the day, he left. She didn't expect him to come back at this time. Rong Xiao held her hand and strode into the study with his long legs. I'm here to bid you farewell, said Rong Xiao straightforwardly. Chu Luyue asked in surprise. Now, where are you going? Rong Xiao's lips curled up into a smile as he nonchalantly said, something happened in the clan, and I need to go back to deal with it. So he was going back to his mother's clan. Chu Luyue felt as if a piece of her heart had been dug out. The two of them were separated more than they were together. It wasn't easy for them to be together for a month, but they were going to be separated again. Perhaps the disappointment in her eyes was too obvious. Rong Xiao tucked the strands of hair by her cheeks behind her ears, cupped her face, and planted a kiss on it. Don't worry. I'll go to the Dark North Dynasty to find you soon. Chu Luyue hugged his thin waist and said in a muffled voice. Really? Rong Xiao pinched her white and delicate earlobe and laughed softly, but his tone was gentle and doting. Of course. Someone was arrogant and presumptuous. How could he sit back and do nothing? When the time comes, I'll give you a big gift. Digression. Tomorrow is the Diligent February. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.